Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I see lots of people logging in, so that's really exciting. My name is Kara. I am head of marketing at Hustle Fund. This is Getting to 3 Million in ARR, an event designed to help startup founders and teams unlock revenue for their companies. We are so excited for this event. We have an amazing lineup of speakers today, and we're going to dive into their sessions very soon. Just going to give folks a few minutes to get logged in and get settled. In the meantime, we would love to where you're dialing in from and what are you building? So feel free to pop that and tell us where you are and maybe a little your startup. We would love to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. And just in general, I'm a really big believer in community. When you're building a company, it can be really lonely and hard. And so I hope you are able to use this event and this community that's joining us today to support one another after the event. Please feel free to connect. Okay, I'm super excited for this event. Unlock revenue is critical for startups if they're going to thrive, especially in today's market. And so we're going to break it down today into 3 categories: sales, marketing, and product. We're going to kick it off with marketing. And for that conversation, we've got Gaurav Agarwal, Chief Growth Officer and Revenue Leader at ClickUp. We're going to be diving into how to find the right lead gen channels to grow the top of your pipeline. After that, we'll dig into sales. For that, we've got Armand. He's an early sales leader at Carta, then at Pave, and now he's the founder of 30 Minutes to President's Club. He's going to share a framework for building a repeatable sales process. And then we're going to dive into product-led growth with Kataki Rao. Kataki is a product legend. She is super passionate about monetizing new products. We are recording this. I will continue to say that because I know many of you will just need that verification. And we are also allocating time for at every session for your questions. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little Q&A box. So feel free to drop your questions in there anytime. Before I bring Gaurav on, and I know he is ready and excited to get started, I want to make sure that you all know about something that Armand is cooking up. It's called Hustlers Retreat, and it is an in-person event taking place next month in Northern California at a gorgeous location that's like hundreds and hundreds of acres big. The purpose of the event is to help founders and their teams get out of the weeds of the business and think strategically about how to hit those big milestones as they get ready for their next raise. I don't know about you guys, but when I work at startups in the past, I have found that we have been very distracted by putting out fires and dealing with the minutia of the day-to-day. And that big picture, strategic thinking just kind of got pushed and pushed and pushed. And so we developed this event to help startup teams carve out time to think about how are they going to hit the next sort of level of their company's growth. It's going to be super fun. There's hiking trails, and we're going to tell ghost stories and play volleyball and do a pool party. There's a pitch event with angel investors. It's going to be a blast. Okay, enough chat from me. Let's get started. Gaurav, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me here, Kara. And hello, everyone. Really, wow, a lot of people are interested to learn about growth, and I'm so grateful for your time today.
We're so grateful for your time today. We know you're a very busy man. You're building a behemoth of a company. In fact, could you start off by telling us a little bit about what ClickUp is?
Yeah, so ClickUp is all-in-one productivity platform that allows you to bring all your tools, all your teams in one place. So docs, lists, views, whiteboards. It's really the operating system for modern work as we look at it. And we are one of the challengers in a very crowded space, but I take a lot of pleasure in saying we've been growing really, really fast. And really our secret sauce is how do you blend innovation and flexibility with ease of use. So that's what ClickUp does. We are here to revolutionize work and make everyone more productive. I'm very curious, has anyone here used ClickUp? Oh, wow, great.
Oh yeah, tons of people.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Okay, and so then when you joined the company, can you tell us about how many customers ClickUp is serving, and then how many customers ClickUp is serving now?
So I can't give you the exact numbers, but we have more than 8 million teams who have signed up on the platform and use the product. And through my time, we have grown 100% year on year, and we have cut CAC by 50%. So we have cut CAC into half and continued to grow by 100% year on year.
And CAC is customer acquisition cost.
CAC is customer acquisition cost. So we are spending half the money we were spending before to get the customers, but we still grow. We more than doubled our customer base over last year.
Oh my goodness. So what do you attribute the reduction of CAC to? Network virality, or is your team just getting more efficient?
I think it's a mix of all of those. It's but really at the crux of this is it's really having really good data in place that allows you to cut waste.
Oh, interesting. Can you say more about?
So ClickUp, like other players, we spend quite a substantial amount of money on advertising. We are a scale up, right? We are at a place where we have millions of people, and we are continuing to get more millions of users every month, every year. So that we are on that rapid growth trajectory. And even before markets were correcting, I come from a worldview where efficient growth is the only way to go ahead, because you want sustainable growth. You don't want a blip and then you don't want to die down after a blip. You want to sustain, and you want to build momentum. So the first thing I did as soon as I joined was we need a really good data system, so we know where are we overspending, where are we underspending. That allows you to cut a lot of waste, especially as it comes to advertising dollars. And for any marketing team, advertising dollars are perhaps the biggest cost center of anything else, especially for a fast growing company. So that's how we were able to trim a lot of the waste. But then when you couple that with, we have a better website practice, you have to always think full funnel. So when you think about how do I make the top of the funnel efficient, but then you also have to extract more value from the people you already have in the funnel. So then you think about, how can I make my website efficient? How can I make my product onboarding better? What campaigns can I run so that I can reactivate people who I've lost? If you deploy all of that stuff together, then you end up seeing the returns that we have seen.
And when you talk the data and how that was the first thing you did when you joined the team, what kind of data points are you looking at? Are you looking at retention or the lifetime value of customer, or what are the key data points that you found to be most valuable?
You'll have to look at a range of different data points, right? Because some of them are early indicators, some of them are actual KPIs that have taken the time that they need to age. But I would say the few main KPIs that one needs to look at is NDR. In SaaS, NDR is extremely important. Net dollar retention, which means over on your cohort, if you make $1 today, how much would you make a year from now? And if you're going to make, say, $1.25, then your NDR is 125%. So that's really good. So you look at NDR, you have to look at LTV. Ultimately, the equation that you're truly trying to optimize towards is LTV to CAC. If your LTV to CAC is in a good place, you can spend more money because the LTV will pay back the CAC.
Sure. Which obviously comes back to retention, right? I mean, your LTV goes up, the higher your retention is.
Yes, 100%. So
yeah,
this is very interesting, right? In SaaS. So if you're Netflix, retention is the only way to improve LTV, because you buy and you can't buy 20 licenses. You just buy one license and you use it. But in SaaS, another way to improve LTV is you have two levers. You can get more money from the customers you already have. Because in SaaS, at least for ClickUp, what happens is a small team starts using it. That's 5 seats. Then they start talking about ClickUp with adjoining teams, and 5 becomes 10 and 15 and 20. So here's the difference. The way you improve LTV is actually 2 things. Ensure that your customers don't leave you. That's one. But second, the customers that you do have, give them such an amazing service that they maximize revenue. I'm talking about it as if they are 2 different things. They're not 2 different things. They're one thing. But oftentimes the tactics that you take are very different. Retention is about how do you onboard them successfully so they're going to stay. Expansion is about How do you find other add-ons to sell to them? How do you find deeper solutions that you can cross-sell, upsell? So there are these two different strategies that both ladder up together. So that's how you can improve LTV in a business where really you have a very high ceiling. So say if you're Airbnb, you can either ensure that people don't churn, or you can ensure that the ones who are buying from Airbnb continue to buy a lot of stuff from Airbnb. But I'm saying both the strategies are needed, but that's where you have to look into the data and figure out where does the problem lie, where does the opportunity sit, and you go attack those opportunities.
Okay, cool. So well, let's actually back up a bit. Who are you serving? Who's your customer base?
So we are serving businesses and teams. We are serving teams that collaborate together to get work done. We serve SMB, mid-market, enterprise, so a B2B company, but we predominantly serve teams within those companies, and we serve them across all businesses of all sizes.
That's a pretty big market to serve. So when you arrived, you looked at the data, and then what was your next step? Did you just throw a bunch of advertising dollars in a number of different directions to see what would stick?
Yeah.
Or what was step one?
When I arrived, the first thing was we didn't have ways to track what's happening in the machine. We didn't have cohort models. We didn't know how is a bunch of customers that we got last month behaving differently than the ones we got 6 months ago. So the first thing we had to do was define the funnel, define the KPIs, clean up the data model, and then build cohorts. And then we can start tracking who is doing what, like how are these cohorts behaving? Where is the value coming from? So the first 3 months wasn't really like, let's do a bunch of new stuff. The first 2 to 3 months was let's look at everything that we have already done through the phase of hyper growth and clean up the data, and now cut the fat wherever we can, cut the fat. Then you're left with the good stuff. Now start building again. So the first 3 months was getting the house in order, which for any modern marketing team or growth team comes down to data. So typically for modern marketing teams, it comes down to like two big dimensions of focus. One is data-driven work, which is growth product, demand gen, performance marketing, all of that stuff. And the other one is positioning and what you might call like product marketing, creative content. So we were cleaning the house in both of those areas in the first 3 months to figure out what is it that we truly need to do. So on one side, we improved our data systems, but then on the other side, who are we really targeting? What's the persona? Why are we going after them? Why do we believe this persona is better than the other persona? So there was a lot of strategic thinking and focus on that second side.
It's interesting because you also mentioned, I mean, your target demographic, your target customer is such a broad range of different companies. And so how do you think about positioning across those different personas? Do you need different positioning for enterprise versus SMB?
You do. I mean, what happens is in SMB, the buyer is the user most of the times. As you go up market from SMB to say mid-market to enterprise, I have approved software spent for more than say $100,000 for my team. I have not even logged into that software. So as you go enterprise, as you go up market, the delta between a user and a buyer increases. So in SMB, you only have, you don't have as much of a difference between, say if I'm running a small company with 10 people, with 50 people, I know I'm a user, I'm a doer. I'm not an executive who has a team of 100 people. So then what happens is I'm the user and the buyer. So the same message that you have for a user resonates with the buyer. But as you go up market, if I'm leading a team of 100, I don't have the time to go check every software team that my team wants. So I want my team to do the due diligence, which is why PLG is a hot thing right now, product-led growth. My team tests the tool and they like it. But then I also need to believe that this company can really be amazing. So in enterprise, you have two personas. You have the user and then you have the buyer. So, and positioning matters because the buyer doesn't want, I don't care about, will this send notification? I want to know what's the meta problem that it's solving. Users care a lot more about like features and details and so on.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. So then can you give us an example of like messaging you would use for a user for an enterprise customer versus the messaging you might use to the buyer? And where would each of those people sort of see that messaging?
It's a great question. It's very hard. You can't, so your website as you see it is a universal vehicle for everyone. So the first thing is for you to have a brand platform that actually can work across users and buyers both. Your identity, companies are like individuals in the sense that I'm an individual. When I talk to a bunch of friends, I might adapt my style when I talk to those friends, but I'm still one individual. So the same is true for your messaging and your brand platform as well. You have to have one consistent platform that you can easily adapt to the persona that you are trying to use. So you cannot have different messaging platform. You can have variations of that platform for different personas that you're trying to talk to. I'll actually use an example from Molecule, which was my previous company. At Molecule, we were building air purifiers that would destroy the pollutants versus collecting pollutants. Most air purifiers are essentially filters. They collect pollutants on the filter. But what we were doing is we were destroying. So our message platform was destroy, don't collect. But if we were talking to someone with allergies, we would say destroy allergens, don't collect. Similarly, if we were talking to someone who had a mold issue, we would say destroy mold, don't collect. So we were trying to destroy hay fever, don't collect. So this is a good example where you come up with a platform that can very easily adjust. Now in ClickUp's context, if I'm talking to say a marketing manager, I would tell them you can get your job done efficiently. There are custom fields that allow you to manage your projects efficiently. So I will stay at that tactical layer. If I'm talking to a CMO, I would tell them, get your team to work on the most important things that you care about. Break down silos, improve collaboration, consolidate tools and save budget that you can use elsewhere. So you'll have to adjust the playing field, but then your message platform needs to be making teams productive and efficient. Now that message can adapt to a user, that message can adapt to a buyer.
And so do you have different landing pages for these different sort of personas? Yes.
You do.
No.
You do have different landing pages. Yes, you do have to build different landing pages that can go from the nav bar, right? But what you need to do is you need to come up with a home page where you can sprinkle, where your 60% of your homepage should be able to talk to everyone. The remainder 40%, you can come up with like modules. So for example, what you can do is you can build your homepage as if it's a universal homepage where anyone can land. But what you can do is you can build a module and say, executives love ClickUp. And then you can say, why do executives love ClickUp? 1, 2, and 3, like because they save budget, team productivity goes up, and silos get broken down. And then what you can do is if they say read more, you can then take them into a dedicated landing page where it's all about executives. So typically what you'll have to do is say design a website that's 60-70% standardized to anyone. But then you have like these modules that you're sprinkling in where different personas can get what they want and then can click on read more and go read more.
Makes sense. Give them the opportunity to opt in, but don't necessarily present them with all the information at once. That would be overwhelming.
Yeah, give them breadcrumbs, like throw enough breadcrumbs. So if I'm an executive and I want to read about data security and other things, I can click on a tile that says enterprise grade features, and I can click on it and go there. If I'm a user and I care about what's the price per user, or if I'm a user, I care about like, do you have AI as a feature? I want to use AI as a part of my workflow. Then throw that breadcrumb in. So it all comes down to coming up with a standard platform, then knowing who your personas are, and then integrating them within the story. So no one feels, so your core personas don't feel excluded, and they can always click on the breadcrumbs and go into that deep stuff.
Okay, makes a ton of sense. I love it. And I feel like I've also seen that in practice on a number of SaaS company websites now that you have. Okay, so then, but let's talk about before you even get to the website part of things. I mean, unlocking revenue through enterprise customers is a huge opportunity, especially for startups. a lot of enterprise companies, it's hard to get in front of the right person, right? They have so much coming into their inbox.
Yes.
How do you recommend that get in front of a CMO? Or would you recommend that they start with actually the user side of things and then try and get like market up from there?
It comes down to like, what is your product and solution? So if you're going to build, and then you can't force a user side of it if you don't have a user side of it, right? So it comes down to what's your product, what's your solution. An enterprise level user would behave almost the same way as an SMB level user or as a mid-market level user. Of course, it's a gross generalization, but an SEO manager in enterprise does the same thing that an SEO manager in SMB does. You research the keywords, you come up with a strategy, you write the blog. So if you attack at the user level, the delta between the enterprise and SMB merge. There's not so much of a difference. And it's not much easier to get enterprise level users in enterprise than it is to get users in SMB. So we have to first decide. It's less so about enterprise or SMB. The first thing you need to decide is, if I'm going to go with this software, this is what I'm offering. Who cares about this the most? Is it the buyer or the user? That's what you have to align, or you have to identify who in the organization cares about it the most. Then if you decide to choose enterprise, you will have to come, and you don't have enough money. If you have a lot of money, yes, go get all the users. But assuming you don't have enough money, then you have two motions that you will have to pick. Unfortunately, you can't do it all. At ClickUp stage, I can do it all. I go after the buyers. I have a tops-down strategy and I have a bottoms-up strategy, and they're both working really well. But for a small company that's just getting started, you can't do both. So you will then have to pick what is going to work well for me. Do I go bottoms up or do I come tops down? You will most likely go bottoms up if you have a big TAM, because then you won't just be an enterprise company. You would try to serve as many users as you can wherever you get them, right? So if you go bottoms up, you will be able to latch onto a huge TAM. Your deal sizes will be much smaller because you're selling to small users or small teams. You're not selling to a big corporate directly, but your deal velocity will be faster. You will sell more stuff quickly. If you come tops down, then you will have to go after the executives, but the deal size will be huge. But winning them over will be hard because there's just so much competition competing for their times. And also, if you go enterprise, they will also demand a lot of features like safety, security, other things that oftentimes startups don't have. Which is why you'll have to come down to what are you truly building and who experiences the pain the most. And then how big is your TAM? Of course, you'll have to look at how much money can you make with that, and then you choose, do you want to go bottoms up or tops down?
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about channels to explore. What kinds of channels are you exploring? Well, are the channels that you explore for enterprise different than the channels that you explore for SMB?
Yes, that is correct. The channel mix would change substantially. So I have a framework for this, right? And we'll push it to the extreme. So we can use the framework to understand like I'm just pushing it to the extreme so we can test the validity of the framework. But let's assume, can you guys see a whiteboard? I'm trying to share a whiteboard.
Oh yeah, I love a whiteboard moment.
Okay.
Hopefully you guys can see this too.
Can you guys see a whiteboard?
Yes. Yes.
Let's say we come up with a framework where on one axis you have LTV, right? And on the other axis, how big is the audience that you are selling to?
So audience size and lifetime value.
Yes. Audience size very high, right? And audience size very low.
Okay, I think I can only see the 2 lines.
Oh, do you not see the text?
I do not see the text.
Wow.
Is it perhaps? Oh, you see the text. Oh, it's just me. Okay, well, ignore me then, because I know about this matrix. All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Now let's test this matrix. Let's say you are a deep tech vendor, or you're a defense tech vendor. You've come up with something that only the Department of Defense would buy, or you can sell it to like the few governments in the world. So your audience size is very, very low. Like you have what, like 50 countries who can afford to spend that money. If you're able to sell that, you are going to make hundreds of millions of dollars in contract value. Or let's say you are Boeing, or you are Air France, like let's say you are one of those companies, right? Clearly, you're not going to win them over. You're not going to get customers through advertising. That's not going to work. So what do you do on something like this? You have to run a very tight biz dev motion, right? It's a very one-on-one motion. You cannot run a massive advertising. So how do you do that? You basically try to penetrate it through advisory boards. You have to work the network. You have to work the network and so on. So you can't, like, this whole idea of marketing seems to dissolve. At that point, marketing, yeah, you need marketing. You need to know what are you selling. You need to be able to sell it well. You need a good pitch deck. But after that, it's not selling. After that, it's not marketing. It's like really your ability to work through your network. So it becomes very sales heavy at that point, because you're selling something that needs you to work through a network. On the other hand, let's assume you have a product that has very low LTV, but very, very high margin, but very, very huge audience size. Let's say your LTV is $10. That's it. You can't make any money off it. If your LTV is $10, I'm going to the extreme so you guys know what I'm trying to say. If your LTV is only $10, then there's nothing you can do. Sorry, this is not, Zoom needs to really work on their experience. But so let's say LTV, that's why you guys should move to ClickUp. ClickUp has whiteboards. But anyway,
Done.
if your LTV is very low, let's say $5, but your audience size is massive, you can, $5 is actually very low. Let's go with that. Yeah, $5 audience size is huge. There's still a business you can build. The problem is you cannot spend money on expensive marketing. You cannot advertise because it's going to be very expensive for you to advertise. So then what do you do then? Then you come up with community. Like, can you build something where the community is so passionate that the community does the growth work for you? So you find a way to hack community, like Product Hunt comes in, Reddit, Hacker News. There's a lot of consumer apps, Dropbox, Airbnb. I don't know about Airbnb, but Dropbox, I know for sure. Dropbox blew up on Reddit, right? Dropbox did not have a high LTV, but that's where they launched and they got a lot of traction. So you will have to find organic ways to grow. That comes down to community, or you are really good at SEO and content marketing. So your acquisition is free because you're writing a ton of good blogs, people like it. In modern day, TikTok is a good example. There are some companies that have nailed how to go viral on TikTok, and that serves them really well. Or you do organic stuff, right? The other way to look at this is you have strong product growth levers. You have referrals, you have network effects. So what happens is, okay, Dropbox is a good example of this again. I use it, but for me to get more GBs for free, I would invite 2 other people. I would invite 3 other people. So you cannot afford to spend money on marketing. So you will have to resort to organic methods. They ultimately come down to organic. Organic will ultimately boil down to some form of, there are product growth levers, referrals, virality, or you're really good at content and hacking the content platforms for distribution. SEO falls into that category. LinkedIn falls into that category. TikTok falls into that category. Or you are really good at community. You have such a passionate user base that they go and do your bidding. Now, let's say your LTV is $5, but you have only 300 people who are going to buy. Then that's really a very, very bad business. You don't want to be in business. So this is a very bad idea. You want to stay away from this. And now if you have the high LTV and if you have the high audience size, if you have a huge audience size, do all of this. Sorry, do all of this, but then you can also do Sorry, if I knew I would struggle with whiteboard so much, I would have pre-built this. Sorry.
That's okay.
So if you know, so if you can do the organic stuff is much needed. It's not a placeholder. You have to do it. But then on top of that, what you can do is you can accelerate growth through paid media. Here's where you can
So
do
that's paid me. So, okay. So ads on Facebook or Google or sponsorships of events, that kind of thing.
brand. So now you can basically afford to spend money because you have a business that can afford you to spend money. Now, I would say by most of the startups would fall in between, like for example, enterprise stage companies. If you are selling to 100,000 buyers in the US, you will not, of course, you will not take this strategy, not going to work. You don't have high audience, you have low audience. So then you'll figure out what are you're not going 1 to a million. You're trying to figure out like, how do I reach them in places where there is scale? But it looks a lot like this. So then what this becomes is trade shows. You go to trade shows. So if you're an enterprise company, where would you go? You'll go to trade shows. You will do one-on-one, one-to-one outbound emails. You would set up a customer advisory board. You will work the network. Ask investor references. Set up a referral program. Throw a dinner party where you ask them to bring their friends along. So that's the whole gamut. And it ultimately boils down to how much LTV do you have and what can you spend. It looks like people are not seeing the.
Some are, some aren't.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's a Zoom bug.
Let me take the screenshot. And I don't know if I can even paste it here. No.
When you're editing, we can't see it. It sounds like there's just a little bit of a lag, but now it's showing up.
Maybe that's what it is. I shared the whiteboard, so I don't know if people can see the whiteboard, but essentially the sentiment is you have to first identify how much money do you have. If you're making LTV, you can spend. That's what LTV decides for you. And then the audience size decides, do you go 1 to many all at once, or do you go like 1 to 100? Like you identify how big is your audience. If you're only going to sell to 100,000 enterprise buyers, there's no point trying to buy billboards in Miami. That's a bad idea. Maybe buy a billboard close to the SF airport where people fly, but that's a different story. But a billboard and an out-of-home strategy will not work for you because you are only targeting 100,000 buyers. You don't need the 5 million other people to see it. It's just wasted money.
I've seen plenty of ClickUp billboards. And so just to clarify, that works because your market size is so big. You can serve any, okay.
ClickUp is here. So we have the community stuff. We have the product-led growth levers. We have a very strong SEO motion. And then we pair them with a very strong performance marketing motion. And then we also have a sales team, right? So you can build a sales team here because you can afford to pay for the sales team. So ClickUp, this is why I love ClickUp as a business, because it allows me to flex in both of these directions. And they actually work hand in hand with each other. Because we do all these broad advertising, we end up catching a lot of these people where the LTV is low, but then that also creates brand awareness for us to penetrate into the high LTV segment. So ClickUp is actually across this whole gamut, across the whole side on the right, actually right in the top, because our LTVs are not $5. We are a SaaS business, our LTVs are very healthy. So that's where we would fall in this zone. And if you have a business like that, your biggest problem would be the curse of choice. You'll have just so much to choose from, but you'll still have to find 1 or 2 things. You can do 20 things, that's fine. Most of your growth will still come from like the 2 or 3 things. That the 25% of the work you do will drive 80% of the value.
And then do you double down on those things, or do you, okay.
You double down on those things because you will have to create a moat, and it has to be an operational moat, a technology moat, a compounding network effects moat. So that's going to be extremely important.
Okay. I have one more question, and then I know we have a lot of questions in Q&A that I would like to get to and 15 or so minutes we have left. So the one that I want to cover though is around, let's say you're a startup, you don't have a lot of funding, that you have a pretty big market and maybe a high enough LTV that you could, actually, let's call it a low LTV. No, let's call it a high LTV, because I want to think about how would a startup identify where to start their efforts? They have a limited amount of budget. You talk about curse of choice. How do you go about addressing the curse of choice when you don't have a ton of money in the bank?
And how big is your audience size?
You have a big audience.
Okay, then that puts us, if I was to found ClickUp today, if ClickUp was found today, what would be your plan of attack? Is that a good way to look at it?
Yes.
Yeah. The first thing that you need to do is you are launching a business, right? So you have a good, I'm assuming you have product market fit. The most important thing is you have product market fit. If you don't have product market fit, there's a problem.
Okay.
So if you have a product market fit, you at least have a persona in mind that is using your product and loves your product. So the first thing you do is you go and talk to some of them and figure out, like, why do you like it? And so on. And you draft your messaging that is compelling. That's number one. Once you know so now you at least know what am I selling, right? So you have the idea very clear. The next thing that you do is when you talk to these people, you try to figure out, like, hey, how did you hear about us? Where do you hang out? So if I was doing ClickUp today, I would first nail this. So assuming I'm very user focused, because ClickUp is we obsessed with the user experience a lot. I try to figure out who are the users, what industries are they coming from. Based on that, are there Facebook groups I can go into, read, understand? But my first point of attack would be try to build a community, get the community excited. They can start using the product. They'll tell their friends about it. So I will get started with product hunt, community, all of that stuff from the get-go. That will at least start creating some sort of momentum in your machine. SEO is something you can do, but it'll take a long time. SEO takes like 6 to 9 months to show results. So when you're getting started, it's not very. ClickUp invested in SEO early on, and we are benefiting from that today. But you don't have to invest in SEO. So if I was doing ClickUp today, I would first nail the community lever and the product growth lever, retention and virality. Once I nail those two things, that will maximize my LTV, especially the product growth levers. They will maximize my LTV. Then I will think towards, okay, I have a base of a business growing. Where do I go now from here? If I decide we are working really well in, say, marketing, and CMOs love our product, then I'll go towards trade shows and I'll start outbound emails. If I decide that we need to stay on the user track and continue to do the bottoms up PLG motion, then based on the LTV I have, I will start playing with paid media and I'll start paying with organic content. The beauty is by this time and then I'll put a referral, like refer a friend, get 10 seats free or something of that sort. So that's how I'll play the game. The first thing is to actually nail product levers, so your LTV is maximized, and then work on community. Community can scale really well and with very high LTV. That's the beauty of it. Then you start throwing in new programs at it. And depending on the budget you have and the audience size you have, you can most likely you'll land on sponsorship. You'll do some advertisements and you'll do some events and trade shows. That's the mix of where the buck would go.
When you talk about building community within your product, what does that mean exactly? What does that look like?
It means different things for different people, but ultimately it's a bunch of people who are so passionate about the mission you are on, and they see you as a vehicle to achieve that mission. So people don't rally. Okay, people don't rally behind marketing campaigns. That's a bad idea. When people build community by saying that, oh, if you do this contest, you will win an iPad. We do that too at ClickUp. That's fine. You should do everything. There's no harm in doing it. But know that when you engage at that level, you are engaging them at a very transactional layer. Then there are people who would live by your product. That's a very strong community. And then there are people who would live by your product because it furthers a mission that they believe in.
Oh,
that is if you can get to that place of operation. So what I mean by that is people are, even if Apple rolled out something shitty, there are absolute people who would buy it because they believe that Apple is the mission, Apple is the brand, and they stand for design first, and they believe in user experience has to be really simple. So almost like there are three layers of this community, where you first have engaging people at a transactional layer, buy one, refer a friend, get something free. People do that, it's fine, but you're not going to get a strong word of mouth. The next layer to that is people who are so passionate about your product, they'll talk about it to everyone. That's awesome. And third, they're so passionate about your mission and your brand that anything that you release, they will 100% stand by you.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I want to dig into more of this. And every time you say something, I have like 3 follow-up questions. But I see the chat is going off, the Q&A is going off. So let's let our community, speaking of which, pipe in here. So a number of people actually had a clarifying question around product market fit. You said a few moments ago, if you don't have product market fit, that's a whole different thing.
Yes.
How do you know when you have product market fit?
There's a lot of research and literature on this. There's a few things you can do, right? A very scientific way is your retention rates very high? You got people in, they continue to use the product. Is your retention rates, is your churn very, very low? If your churn is very, very low, you know people are using your product. So that's one signal of product market fit. The other one is when you talk to someone, do their eyes light up? You feel it. Like, I think that's a very important signal as well. It's not just about seeing your retention cohorts. That should happen. But is there someone who gets so excited from the work that you're doing that you're like, yes, you see it in their eyes? And then the third thing that you can also do is, which people do, are people willing to pay for it? Will it solve what would it replace in their lives? How much are they willing to pay for it? So there are many ways in which you can triangulate if you have product market fit or not. But the mistake I see people make is they think they have product market fit. So it needs a very deep level of intellectual honesty to basically say, my baby is not good, I'm sorry, and it's not working. But so let me figure out how to change it. Most of the times people are so attached to what they think it is that they find signals to confirm the bias that they have product market fit versus signals to actually think about why do I, based on the data, why do I not have product market fit? So it's better to be an optimist that you will get to product market fit. But when operating, be a skeptic. So you're basically saying, do I really have product market fit? Do I really have product market fit? And between the 3 signals, right? Are customers raving about you? Do their eyes light up? Are your retention cohorts holding strong? And then is someone willing to pay? That's the third part that people don't realize. Yeah, you can have product market fit, but if people are not willing to pay for it, you don't have a business product fit.
And if you don't have product market fit yet, this might be a stupid question, but don't start marketing right? Just go back to the drawing board. Correct?
Because even before there's marketing and growth, there's customer development. That's what I did. My first job after banking, I spent 2 years just doing customer development. And there's this amazing guy, Steve Blank, is the father of all things product market fit, lean startup, whatever you call it. It actually has to begin first with your own realization of what are you truly selling and how can you wrap it in a message that people will respond to. So true marketing will always begin with product as your core, in the sense you actually have something that is working. You're able to build a story around that people get excited about. If you can nail these 2 things first, that's what you need to do. And then you can think of distribution. There's no point trying to think about distribution and lead gen and how do I grow my users when you don't have the first 2 things nailed.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you. We had a lot of questions about that in the chat, so I wanted to make sure we addressed it. A couple of people are asking about sponsorships. Why do you think this is an important opportunity for high LTV companies? And then, like, how do we go about making sponsorships happen and make them work for us?
I would not do sponsorships. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll do it in a very targeted manner. So sponsorships are about getting your building brand awareness. So let's say I attended a MarTech conference, a marketing technology conference, and there was a sponsor, and I saw a logo, and I'm like, okay, great, that's fine. If I bet you that it's building relevance because I know the company now. So tomorrow, if I need a solution, I can go to them. But it's not going to move your business as a startup. What might be interesting is if I see the logo and then it's paired with a one-on-one outbound where where someone from that company reaches out and say, hey, Gaurav, you were at this conference. We are building this amazing technology. Would you be interested? So sponsorship, trying to shoot for brand awareness when you're less than 10 million in ARR is a really bad idea. There's no point. All your programs need to be very targeted, focused on, you have this pain point, I'm going to solve it. Please come engage with me. Building brand awareness is a very bad idea.
Okay, but you have talked about, actually, can we get rid of the whiteboard for just a second so we can see your face? And
yeah, we can do that.
Amazing. Hi. So, okay, so then let's talk about trade shows. I mentioned those a couple of times. So why are trade shows valuable? And then how can startups leverage trade shows where there's like hundreds of other companies, or how do they stand out?
Yeah, great question. You have to have an offering that is truly stand out. If you have another like offering, that you have to find a moat, right? So if you're a really amazing marketer, you can launch a soap company and still build a billion-dollar company. There are people who have done that. But if you are a technology startup, then your technology needs to solve something that stands out. The problem that you solve needs to stand out for someone. So let's say you build a marketing technology startup that solves a problem that I have. Then if you go to a conference that is about marketing executives, or marketing executives are in that conference, and if you have a booth, most of the times people go to these conferences, they walk around the booth. If your booth is catchy and you're calling out the problem really clearly, I will come to your booth because the problem resonates with me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your LTV is $1,000, you will never break even. So it's a really bad idea to do trade shows with such small LTVs. But if your LTV is $100,000, then let's say 20 people came to your booth, one of them ended up buying. That $100,000 is that experiment was totally worth it. But if your LTV is $1,000, 20 people came to your booth and I bought it for $1,000, it's a really bad idea to do a booth with such low LTVs.
Oh, okay, interesting. Do you think there's opportunities outside of the trade show floor, hosting a happy hour afterwards for the attendees, or okay?
You can do things like that, where some people do guerrilla marketing, where they'll take taxis and cover the taxis with your brand. You're trying to build brand awareness. But even if you say, some people do this all the time, you'll throw a cocktail party where people can come attend after that. But in that happy hour, you don't get to pitch the product as much. So it's still a brand awareness play more than anything else. So you have to be very careful as a startup that brand awareness is helpful if you believe it will translate. And you have to pair brand awareness with something else where you're doing emails or you're finding ways to engage those people. But if you're just doing it because let me sponsor and get my logo and business will come to me, that never happens.
Okay. Gaurav, I could talk to you for 3 more hours, and I would like to, frankly. But I realize that we are out of time here, and I think a lot of people have questions we didn't get to. Is there a way we can stay in touch with you? Are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me in those places. I don't know if people can send you some questions. I'll be more than happy to do a session again if that's helpful in any way. But yeah, cool. I mean, I'd love to stay in touch with the community, and if I can help in any way, I'm always down.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. We're so grateful that you gave us your time today and shared your wisdom. And I know we just were at the tip of the iceberg here. We'd love to work with you again. You guys follow Gaurav on Twitter and LinkedIn. I'll send out the links. Check out ClickUp. It's an amazing product. I can personally vouch. And I don't know, virtual claps for Gaurav.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Gaurav. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye. Okay. Oh my gosh, you guys, that was so fun. I hope that you got some value out of it. I know there was so many questions we didn't get to. I am sorry. We will share some of the questions with Gaurav later. Maybe he can do like an AMA for us or something like that. So, okay, we are moving into our next topic here. A number of you, by the way, have asked if we are recording this. We are. and we will send out the recording later. So if you have to run, I understand, but I wouldn't run yet because the next speaker is Armand Farouk, and he is a beast, you guys. Okay, so Armand, there he is. You can probably see him. Before we bring Armand on, I just want to make sure you guys know about Hustlers Retreat. It is an in-person event we are doing next month in Northern California at a gorgeous property. We're going to be diving into some tactical and really strategic sessions on marketing and lead gen. So if you like Gaurav's session, you're going to love Hustlers Retreat. But let's bring Armand back so we can dive into some really fun sales stuff. Armand is the founder of 30 Minutes to President's Club, which is a media company that has a newsletter, the #1 sales podcast in the world, I think, a YouTube channel. Everything's really tactical. They have an awesome toolkit. Armand, we're so happy you're here. Thank you for joining us.
What's going on, everybody? It's amazing. Thank you for having me, Kira. How did the first session go? Sounds like it went great.
The first session was great. The bar is high, but I have no doubt that your session is going to be equally interesting and awesome and tactical. Before we dive in, Armand, thank you again so much for being here. I know you have a million things on your plate and you also advise a lot of startups. So I think everyone's trying to get a piece of your time. So we're really grateful to have you here.
100%. Well, I'm super excited for today. I have a couple plans shared that I thought I could screen share. Is now my time where I can start to steal the show, or are there other things that we want to do to get started?
I want to hear a little bit about your background before we get started, some of the amazing work you've done on sales team at startups in the past. Can you just give us a really quick bio for us?
Absolutely. I will give you a visual bio. And so, hey, everyone, my name is Armand. This is my boilerplate, like where I've been in life, but I won't go long here. This is my career from first job through AARP card. I used to sell my mom insurance over at Northwestern Mutual. That was the first time I ever sold anything. And then from there, I'm actually cut from a finance and consulting cloth. So most of my ex-mentors are MBBers. And so I did corporate strategy at a Silicon Valley dinosaur called Flextronics down in Santa Clara. And then eventually I went into the world of tech. And so I joined Carta around, they were like 50 million in ARR, give or take 300 employees. And that was the first time I was a formal full cycle SaaS account executive. And I joined them like right in the sweet spot of that tipping point of Series C growth. And then I went from being their #1 AE to running their whole sales development function to eventually running all of inside sales. So both closers and openers. And then what a lot of people know me for is my time at Pave, which happened in 2020. And I joined as the 9th employee, first sales leadership hire, second sales hire overall, and at 100K in ARR. And I left with very little sleep, a lot of gray hair, but bringing the team from 9 to 150 employees, 30 folks in the revenue org that I was overseeing through Series A to C, and then past 10 million bucks in ARR from that first 100K. And now I'm a recovering VP of sales, and I run 30 Minutes to President's Club, which is what you said is what I do 100% of my time is I just take the most actionable things I learned from all this stuff back here, and I give those back to the sales community, to sellers, to founders, et cetera. So yeah, that's me.
Wow, what a background. I am really curious, what going from a company that has 50 million in ARR to a company that has about 100,000 in ARR is quite a jump. What attracted you to the opportunity at Pave?
The original thought was Pave was going to be the last job that I ever took on, because I was actually really bored as an AE. If you actually look at my resume, I was never an AE formal sales cycle, like only AE for more than a year, because I would figure out the sales process and then I'd sort of get bored with it after hitting my quota twice. And I got a lot of joy out of helping people build things. And I ultimately wanted to be a founder. And when you're one of the first 10 employees at a company like Pave, especially pre-product market fit, I got about as close to the founder journey without being a founder as you can possibly get. So Matt, our CEO and founder, amazing guy, we were basically attached to the hip. And I was his right-hand go-to-market guy on every fundraise, on every customer deal, on frankly, all of our implementation problems and all these other things. And I wanted to be cut from that cloth. And there was just a really cool founding story behind Pave. And I was in this perfect moment where I wanted to do that pre-founder journey myself so I could go be a founder on my own.
Amazing. And I know you have a great presentation, but I just want to ask one more question so that the audience kind of gets a sense of the variety of things you've been selling.
Yeah.
Carta, really quick, what were you selling? Who was your customer?
100%. So if you all, lots of founders in the audience. So if you have a cap table software, right? Maybe you're using Carta, Poly, maybe you're using ShareWorks, but that would be weird. Typically, a lot of folks start with Carta as their cap table provider. And so I was selling their cap table solution in its earlier days, and they were still the market leader at that time. But I was largely selling to founders in the earlier stages, but in our bigger deals, I was selling to CFOs, controllers, et cetera. And then once I went to Pave, there was like a pseudo adjacent jump there where Pave is a compensation software, right? So there's a really, really powerful compensation data set and a series of compensation tools that allow you to plan and communicate compensation. So the primary customer there was selling to HR. And so selling to CHROs, chief people officers, heads of total rewards at bigger companies. And then 25% of the time we would have to sell to like a CFO type of person, just because they tend to be pretty involved in like equity comp and things like that. So there were some parallels between Pave and Carta. The biggest difference that I would say is a lot of you founders in the audience are probably facing this right now, which is CFOs are really, really, really hard to sell into. But once you win them over, you've got the deal. HR people love to have conversations with you. Like a CFO, I talk to them, I ask one extra question longer than they want, I'm getting whacked over the head. HR people, they just go and they go and they go and they make you think all these amazing things about how you're going to get this deal, and then they can never get any freaking budget. And so the two types of sales cycles were brutally different. CFOs were really tough to crack, but once you cracked them, you got the deal. HR people, you would spend a lot of time figuring out if that deal was real, and frankly, trying to get people who did have budget, like the CFO, involved into those sales cycles to drive them forward. And my guess is that's what's happening to a lot of you founders today, is you're trying to sell deals to these people who are passionate about what you're doing, but they get axed at the finish line because they can't actually bring a deal over the line. So we'll talk about some of those things that we'll do later today.
Cool. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to let you do your thing and I'm going to go on mute while you do it. But you guys, in the meantime, why don't you throw in the chat, what's the biggest sales problem you're facing right now, or your team is facing right now? And we'll use that for some audience Q&A at the end when we have some time. Okay, Armand, you're on.
I love it. And I also love like real-time Q&A. So I'm going to be looking back and forth, not managing my Slack, but managing the chat. So please, 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 I hate doing Shakespearean monologues. These get really boring. I also need time to drink my off-brand LaCroix over here. So please, please interject and tell me what we should be talking about. And that starts now. So agenda. This is how we're going to get you from 0 to $3+ million of ARR today, folks. The purpose is hopefully we're going to help founders scale from founder-led sales through first sales reps. That's sort of the tapering zone that we're in today. The way that I thought we could get there is I give you like a 10-minute story time, which we've already done on me, but I'll give you like the 10-minute story time on like how Pave got to from 100K to 10 million plus of ARR. And that will give you good context for the types of questions you may choose to ask throughout the session. And then from there, as much as nice as like the story time is and all that jazz, frankly, what I would love to spend more of the time on is going deep on the tactics that will get you from 0 to 3 million ARR that you can use to understand why this story played out the way that it did. So there are 4 pieces of that. Okay. The 4 pieces of that are, number 1, in the founder-led sales world, how do you find real problems, not vitamins, but painkillers? Number 2, once you've found a real problem, how do you carry that problem throughout the organization, get it to power, get budget, et cetera? And this is probably the single most thing that I see founders struggle with founder-led sales, is they usually figure out eventually that I need to find problems, not solutions, right? But oftentimes they struggle to get a deal forward and over the line. Then once you have your first sales hires, I have a framework around how you should think about the profile for your first sales hire. And we can even go through some example resumes that I've seen as well, and that'll be fun. And then lastly, number 4, if you need help managing your first couple of sales hires, I have a couple of basic rhythms you may choose to install and sense checks that you can ask yourself to figure out if you hired the right person or if this might be a more systemic product issue. And then hopefully at the end of this, you'll leave with some good tactical advice on how to scale from 0 to 3 million in ARR. So that's what I had for the plan today. So my first question to you all is, it's 10:30. Kira is going to kill me if we go past 11:10, and I want to leave time for Q&A. There are 4 topics. They're split across founder-led sales versus this is the first sales hire line. Discovery, sales process, hiring, managing. Those are the 4 things we're going to cover today. If I had to axe one off of the list, which of the 4 do you want to hear about least? Put it in the chat now. Managing. Oh, that's surprising. 1 and 4, a little bit of 3, a little bit of 3. Okay, cool. And stop putting those, I think 4 is pretty clear. All right, so we're gonna like stay away from managing reps. Good. That is my least favorite part of the job for what it's worth, because this is the most fun part, is like actually coaching founders. That was gonna be my second question. So break, if there was one thing that we should spend more time on, 1, 2, or 3, which one should we spend the most time on? 2. Perfect. This is, Kira, this is working out exactly how I wanted it to. Great. All right, I'm excited. So, what we will do is let's cover, originally I was going to go 1 to 2. Let's actually start with 2. And then we'll work our way backwards into the call. So we'll start with 2, which is call to call, right? So how many calls do you run? What do you ask for at the end of each of those calls, et cetera? And then if we want to zoom in on that first discovery call, we'll go there. And then if you want to start to translate this to another rep that you've hired, we'll talk about like how you hire the right person for that type of thing. Great.
Okay. And Armand, also, since we're talking process, I know somebody before all the numbers showed up really wants to talk about how do we cut down the length of a really long sales cycle. So if we could cover that in process, maybe.
Right. 100%.
Okay.
That is the prime place to talk about it. If I don't cover it, please let me know. And thank you for helping me pull out from the Q&A, because there's just a lot of text all over the place. Great. All right. So very brief story time that doesn't include my resume. Here's sort of what happened at Pave. Okay. So when I first joined, there was a pre-zone that could be an entire webinar of its own that is not my story to tell. And that is Matt's story to tell. And that is the story of how he got our first 20 customers. I joined around 100K of ARR. And in those first 2 quarters, it was 100% Matt before then, just going and building our cab, finding our first customers, selling $500 deals, selling $5,000 deals, et cetera, selling any kind of deal he could find. But ultimately, there was a backbone of a couple of customers that gave us a loose sense of what product market fit might look like. And that's when Killian and I joined. And that's when what we called the finding product market fit days. So that was in like Q4 2020. So we basically had the tail end of 2020. And the reason that I call them the TR only days is a lot of you all know, how many people use Pave in the audience? Compensation software, compensation database, right? My guess is a decent number of people are locked into that database, right? A lot of people know Pave for their compensation data. However, when I first joined, the only product that we had was the total rewards portal, which is a portal that allows you to show employees how much their equity is worth today, how much it could be worth in an exit, plus how much is their salary, benefits, et cetera. And there's also a visual offer letter form of this to help sell candidates on the dream, okay? This product was 1 page. I called it the page with a slider. And that was the extent of what we were selling at Pave. There was no compensation planning. There was no database whatsoever. There was no comp data. It was the page. And that was all we were selling. And somehow we found certain customers that were willing to pay $100,000 for the page, but we used the page as an initial wedge to talk about problems in the compensation space. And we used sales as a mechanism to find product market fit. And that brought us through 2020, where we ultimately hit 400K in ARR off of page deals. And eventually we figured out, hey, there are some bigger problems in the compensation space around data and running your comp cycles. And that began the holy cow, it's working, Mount Rushmore Pave sales era, which was largely in 2021, where there were really 4 reps who carried that business from 400K, which is right around when we found product market fit, to in a single year, we went to 5 million plus of ARR. And that was some of the most fun that we had, because it was locking into place on product market fit. And then it was figuring out how to make the motion fast, how to make it really fast, and how to make it big, and finding the ICP in the sweet spot where deals would move both big and fast. And so, Kira, to the question earlier on, we'll talk about some of the elements of what we call the supersonic sales cycle in terms of when you found a hot ICP lead with a comp cycle coming up, what are the ways that you can turn what would normally be a 120-day sales cycle into a 21-day sales cycle? So talk about that. And then ultimately, we became like a real organization and we started to scale the machine with SDR, AEs, RevOps, sales engineering. I was running marketing for a period of time, and that was $5 million plus, past 10 million bucks of ARR and beyond. And I can't really share numbers, but yeah, that's the Pave story. So it was a blast. It was a fun ride. And what I love doing is talking to founders about this, because if anyone could take the same journey that I was able to take, God knows it was a lot of fun. Cool. Any initial questions before we start running into process? Awesome. I hope that is helpful context for how that thing all worked, because that will inform the types of questions you all ask in this session. Okay.
Actually, I have a quick question. You were selling at that point when you were always selling. Who was closing the deals with you? Was it mostly CFOs? I know we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, or were you still selling to HR, even though that was like a really tricky sales cycle?
So you're saying both the personas, or who on the team was selling, meaning was I individually selling? I think you're saying which personas were we selling?
Persona, yes.
For sure. So at the beginning, the vast majority of our sales cycles, again, probably 75 to 80% of them, were only involving HR people. And we'll talk about this in process a little bit, but here, let me actually pull over here. This is using different titles, but if I were to use the HR org chart and we were to just break it down into at the line selling, above the line selling, and below the line selling, at Pave, we would typically start with a head of people ops. So we'd have like a head of pops kind of thing. And then we would work our way across the organization to a head of total rewards, maybe. And then we would try to work our way up to a chief people officer. And this is actually like bottom up champion selling.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would work our way across and then up and then down to the systems admins and whatnot. However, as the economy started to turn, some of the hardest selling I've ever done in my life were 1, pre-PMF, and then 2, post-economic crash. Okay. Yeah. So once we started to get killed on these budget deals with these HR leaders, we added another step into our sales cycle, which was get to power here, but then also get to power here. So you go up and across, and you add a step to the CFO, and then you work your way down to the technical folks afterwards.
Okay. I think you're probably going to talk about this in process, but I'm sure you had to figure out what was the massive problem that the CFO was thinking about versus what was the massive problem that your head of pops was thinking about, or your CPO.
That's right. 100%.
Okay.
All right. And a lot of that will actually come in discovery, but go ahead.
Who was your first hire?
First hire.
On the sales team? Yeah.
We'll get there when we talk about hiring a first
Okay.
reps. Yeah.
All right. Hold on there, Fonta. We're going to get there.
Wow, lots of good questions. Early ACV for Pave sales at this point. That was, it was hilariously small at the beginning. And we ultimately got our average ACVs past 30,000, 40,000 total. So our goal was, once we found product market fit, we instituted a 5K floor and then a 10K floor. And then the 10K floor stayed, but then it was like, how high can we jack up prices? It was very much, we were A16Z backed, still are. And it was very much the Mark Andreessen school of philosophy is one way to validate that you have product market fit is to raise prices. And sometimes what will happen when you raise prices is your closing ratios will actually go up, because people will start to perceive you as the premium solution in the market. And that's what started to happen, is people started to talk about Pave as the more expensive solution, the premium solution, yada, yada, yada. So if we ever did have to discount, you felt like you were getting the best deal in the world. Not that we would do that all the time, especially in the bull market, but there's something to be said around like keeping your ACVs high and not transactional. Yeah. A lot of people think that, so at 30 Minutes to President's Club, our first 5 to 10 sponsors that we sold, all of them paid $5,000 to $10,000. Every single one of them churned. Every single one of our $5,000 to $10,000 sponsors churned. We raised prices to $50,000 as a minimum. and most people purchase the $75,000 package. Our net revenue retention is currently around 150%. And the reason for that is we made them buy it the right way. And we also forced the bad, cheap customers out with pricing. And we forced the people who are willing to make an investment and rally team and resources around our product, put some money and some time behind it. And those were actually good customers who helped us win the next 10 customers as well. So don't think if you're getting beat up on price that the answer is to lower your price. Oftentimes the answer is to reconfigure your packaging and make sure that you find the right customers who are willing to buy your product the right way. And those are the customers that you'll keep. And those are the customers that will usually help you find the next customers, versus the cheap customers are the ones who make your life miserable. They're the 20% of your customers that produce 20% of the ARR, but they produce 80% of the headaches. And that was 100% true at Pave. And it was 100% true at 30 Minutes to President's Club too. Cool. All right. On that note, let's talk some process stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go on like a 5-minute quick, like top down riff, Kira, and then I'll pause. And if you could help me like ask all the applicable questions after that riff, that will be great. We're going to cover 2 things. First, we're going to cover the golden path. And what the golden path means is independent of the meetings and what you're doing in the meetings, who do you need to get to inside of a deal cycle? Okay. And then we'll talk about what are the things inside of each meeting that you need to get and ask for. Okay. We will not be talking about discovering how to find pain points and problems in each of those meetings. That will come in the discovery section. Okay. But we'll talk about what the goal of each meeting is and who you need to get involved in each meetings. Okay. There are 2 types of motions. The first is called top-down yo-yo selling, which is when you have the opportunity to start at the executive level. Okay. That happens maybe 20 to 25% of the time if you're good. The reality is the vast majority of the time, you're not going to start at a C level or even at a VP level. You're going to be starting at the director level or at the line. And that is where I find that most founders will have deals that sort of lag and stall out. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to take a step back and look at all the deals you've sold, or go to your competitors or go to your friends in whatever cohort you're in, right? And go figure out what is, for your type of product, the golden path of people who need to sign off on a purchase. Usually it looks pretty much the same every time, folks. It's usually starting with a head of or director type person who runs some domain or function that would own the tool that you have. So for example, at Pave, it was the head of people operations. At 30 MPC, when I'm selling sponsorships, it's oftentimes the head of content. Or it might be a head of demand gen that is also involved, another department lead. If I was at Carta, at a bigger company, it's going to be a controller because they oversee the accounting department. At a smaller company, it's going to be a CFO because they oversee finance. At an even smaller company, it's going to be a founder because they're running the cap table. Okay. But whatever your ICP is, you need to figure out your first champion owner, and that is your at the line starting point. From there, usually what needs to happen is there are people who sit lateral or pseudo-lateral to that champion, okay? One step up, one step down. And these are also people who have pull in decision-making. These are not people who technically validate your product, okay? You should be avoiding the people who are deep in the technical weeds until you have some sort of validation that there is a real problem to be solved. So the motion at Pave was start with the head of people ops, maybe do a bigger demo and try to get one of the department leads on. Inevitably, they're going to bring the technical goons onto that call, but you need to do a really good job of making it clear that the goal of this call is not to do technical validation. I will set up a separate one-on-one call with you and my sales engineer separately to manage the technicalities, the integrations, the security, the POC, the sandbox, all that nonsense. But this is to make sure that you two feel like we are solving a business priority. And that is step 2. You win your champion over in step 1 in a killer discovery call. Maybe you do one deep dive demo with that champion for 60 minutes. Maybe they bring one person from their team. But again, you keep the conversation high. And then you thread across. So you thread across the organization, other department leads. And at the end, every time you win over a champion, every time they're like, oh my God, this is amazing, you return their, oh my God, this is amazing with a, this is how I solve your problem. It's getting these other people on board. So you work across and then you work up. You don't work down. You work across and up the account, okay? So now what I can do is I can be like, hey, let's say Kira is my head of people operations. I can be Kira. Today we've gotten Bill, our head of TR, on board. We've gotten you on board. How are you feeling about how things are going with Pave? You're gonna go, oh my God, it's amazing. You can solve all these problems. Hey, I've seen a lot of other people organizations at your stage, other companies backed by Andreessen, what have you, et cetera, who've like bought Pave before. And I've seen these things get blown up. And I think there's a really good use case. Could I make a rec on how we might partner in terms of getting this thing done together? And you'll say, of course, because I asked you for permission. And I'll say, 9 times out of 10, we're talking about compensation stuff here, right? Almost always Jane, your CPO, is going to want to at least like know what's going on here. How can I partner with you to encapsulate all the things that Bill and you said that we could solve for and make this really real for Jane? Is there a way that we could get 30 on our calendar and we can sort of put all this stuff together so that you can get some momentum behind this so we can help you solve some of those problems that you mentioned earlier? This is in your best interest, not in mine, right? I know it's in your best interest. It's not in mine, okay? So you go up and you create this tidal weight of momentum and you win at power. And then you say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. CPO, this is what I actually need in terms of resourcing to get this done. I'm going to go and meet with your technical teams, but are you okay with me going and doing all this technical validation with my engineers and your engineers? And they'll be like, of course. And now typically the people who are dragging their feet in this process and trying to block it, they know they have to do it, right? Deals go to die here early, and deals take long here early on. Deals get barreled when you have the momentum of the CPO at the top. So I'll pause there. That's bottom-up champion selling. Questions?
That was amazing. Okay, we have some questions here. How do you think about low-level engineers who feed back into customers internally about how your product works? Do you sell to them or only the people who are signing off? I know you just addressed that, but what happened? I guess then how about what happens if the goons start to flag things?
The goons. If the technical goons start to flag things, so there are a couple elements of the question. One element of the question is, would you ever consider a groundswell motion? And a groundswell motion is you start with ICs on the front lines, and then you sort of like work your way up from ICs on the front lines to the at the line people to above the line people. That can work, okay? And the number one thing that you need to do is, instead of talking about the technicalities with the technical goons, you need to talk about the problems that the technical goons or the frontline users are facing on the front lines. And then you need to help the people at the line understand how all of the problems on the front line impact their bottom line. So to put this real in an example, at 30 MPC, oftentimes the way that we'll sell to a content leader is we'll actually start with the sales reps. And we'll be like, hey, tell me all the things that are frustrating from a demand gen standpoint, or tell me what you think we should be doing from a content standpoint, right? Tell me how like your internal lead volume is going, yada, 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 yada. And I'll get that intel from the sales reps. And I'll be like, hey, we can help you solve this problem. Can you make an introduction to your marketing team? And I will take that conversation separately with that marketer, because now my job is to speak their language and be the arbiter of what's going on at the bottom of the organization and explain to them my point of view on how we can be helpful to them, right? So that's the groundswell motion. And the other thing that you referenced, Kira, is what happens if you start to get pulled into the weeds with the folks on the technical side, or what if they start to object, right? Typically where this will happen is this will happen on a second call. So your first problem is if you have the first call with the wrong person, right? That's a problem. Try to start at or above the line, okay? So we would only like prospect at director and above. We wouldn't be prospecting into like HRIS analysts, okay? On your second call though, if a first discovery call went well, oftentimes they're going to bring in their technical team, right? So they start to bring in their technical folks. And inevitably what you have to do is in your agenda, in your purpose plan outcome, when you're talking about your PPO, which is how I set every agenda, I will explicitly say like the goal of this call is we talked about the why. in the last meeting. Our goal is to continue to unpack the why, right? Why this is important, why this is a problem worth solving, but also make it really real for you in terms of the how we can solve the problem. What this will not be is this will not be a meeting that's focused on how is it actually possible. So when we start talking about detailed config and dashboards and permissions and integrations and SOC 2 and all that stuff, we will do that on a next call, probably separate with you, Angela, right? Because you're the master of your craft when it comes to these technical topics, and I'm going to need some engineering help there. So let's keep this conversation focused on the right altitude of, are we even solving a problem? And does this feel like the use case is right? And then let's make sure that the use case works on the next call, right? And then one, you set that up front. And then two, every time it comes up, you can nip certain objections in the bud live. It's not like you're completely avoiding the technicalities, right? But if it gets really deep, you can be like, these are awesome questions. This sounds like great stuff that we should wedge. I'm going to write this down and I'm going to put this on the agenda for our technical debrief call afterwards, right? So solve it up front. And then constantly, now that you've solved it up front, tuck things away when they start to get pulled down below the weeds. Cool.
Smart. Love it. You're also basically setting yourself up for another call regardless of that.
Bingo.
Right? So yeah. Somebody else wants to know, as you discuss top down versus bottom up selling, who's the persona that's targeted on the website homepage?
That's a great question. Well, Kara, you might be a little bit more of an expert in this domain, but I did have to build Pave's website off of a $5 Fiverr logo pack in the early days, and that lasted us pretty long. Typically, the language on your page, I find is most helpful to be directed at these people. Because oftentimes the people who are above the line, they're removed from the action. And the messages are going to be lost. The way that I would describe it is 75% of the language should be focused on making these problems sound as crispy as humanly possible, right? Your merit cycles are miserable. Avoid mistakes in your compensation cycles, things like that, right? Get out of spreadsheets and make sure that you can focus on the compensation decisions and upholding equities instead of fixing VLOOKUPs, things like that, right? 25% of the language should be focused on the so that. And the so that applies to your CPO, okay? The so that applies to your CPO, and the so that is like, so that you don't make compensation mistakes, so that you retain your best talent, so that you never lose an offer ever again on a top tier talent. If you do the crispy problem so that impact framework on your website, that's what our old website used to look like when I was writing it out. And that got us really far. And folks, it was ugly, but that website converted like a machine. And then the how is in the FAQs or in the product breakout pages or in the support articles or what have you.
Makes sense. Okay. And then some people are asking about pricing. We start talking about pricing. If we're going to get to that, we don't have to answer it now, but just want to flag it.
Yeah, pricing. I don't know if we will. So we happen to get into that. Part of me wants to get into some of the other content super quickly and see if we have time for pricing, just because that can be a long offshoot. But if we have 5 minutes at the end, I'd love to riff on it.
Great. All right, let's keep it rolling.
Cool. All right. So the other type of selling that I will go through quickly because it doesn't happen as often, and we also have the foundations, is you have your top-down yo-yo selling. So if you ever start a sales cycle high, we'll talk about in a second in the discovery section how you run those meetings a little bit differently. But typically the chief revenue officer, the chief people officer, the chief financial officer, they don't know what's going on down at the front lines. And so if you pepper them with a million discovery questions around how are you running this comp cycle? How are you doing these sort of blogs? How are you doing this? A lot of how situational questions. They'll be like, this is sort of annoying, right? Go talk to my department leads, and they'll kick you below the line. What you want to do is you want to be running executive level discovery, which is you're coming in and you're typically presenting a point of view to these folks. And that point of view is based on things that you see about their organization, right? Maybe it's something you found in their 10K. Maybe it's something you found on their LinkedIn. Maybe it's something that you just know about this person in your research. and you're saying like, hey, typically when we're talking to an organization like X, Y, or Z, we hear priorities like A, B, and C. It's really hard to keep good talent. The war for talent is really hard. You end up overpaying for folks. Compensation inequities are rampant. Whenever I talk to a chief people officer, some of that stuff comes up, but frankly, what I'd love to understand for you is we can talk about the solutions, the features, the benefits that Pave offers all day, but all of those things are going to be in a vacuum if I'm not supporting any of your priorities. So as it pertains to the world of compensation, I've never met a chief people officer who doesn't have 2 or 3 things that are top of mind for them. If we were going to go and just like dig in and unpack a couple things with your team after this call, what are some things from a comp, total rewards, retaining talent domain that are really important for you as a chief people officer? And so we're starting high, right, to priorities. And then I'm going to take those priorities. I'm going to be like, hey, can I get introductions to your head of people ops, your head of total rewards? Because what I'd love to do is understand what they're doing to support those priorities that you mentioned, right? And I'd love to understand how we can further unpack what we can do to attach to those priorities. And I will come back to you with a recommendation based on what I learned from them. And you go from, in this bottom-up motion, you're finding information and you're presenting it here, right? You're going and you're finding problems that they know exist because champions know what the problems are. To, in this motion, you're basically asking for permission to find problems, and they don't even know that these problems exist yet. Your job is to figure out their priorities, figure out the problems that are blocking those priorities, and then put it all together back in front of them later on and be like, hey, I talked to your team. You said X, Y, Z are important. Here are some things that are preventing them from achieving those priorities that you wanted. And here's how we can support those. Here's the problem that you didn't even know that you had, that your team knew you had, but they didn't know how to speak your language and put it all together. And that's top-down selling. Cool. All right.
Cool. That feels very effective. I mean, how do you decide which one to go with?
This is going to be a really underwhelming answer. Whoever answers first. Like most of the time, these people answer first. Every once in a while, those people answer first.
Interesting. Okay. So are you emailing or trying to get in touch with multiple people at a company at the same time?
Always 3 to 5 contacts in account every single time.
Do you tell them like, hey, I also emailed Armand and I emailed Tara?
Not in the cold outreach. But if I first meet someone, usually what will happen is a couple rules with them. Never stop prospecting until you have a champion who's proven themselves innocent. Okay. What I mean by that is if a people ops analyst takes a meeting, don't stop prospecting everyone else. They are not all of a sudden your gatekeeper because they decided to take a meeting first. The moment they are allowed to become the gatekeeper is when they have proven that they are willing to shop us around the organization. So keep prospecting, okay? And don't ask for permission here, right? The moment you ask for permission, you're making them the gatekeeper. The only time they're allowed to be the gatekeeper is when they start to introduce you to other people, okay? So I will keep prospecting the account until I start to get threaded across the account.
And when you say prospecting, you're continuing to reach out to these people. So let's say,
yes,
you get a meeting with somebody, but then you're still continuing, like maybe it's cold emails and the other person isn't even responding. You continue to email them?
That's correct.
Wow. Okay. Is there a number you get to where you're like, all right, this person's never going to respond?
In terms of how many emails I will send to someone, et cetera. Yeah. This is the life. Rule of thumb, 10 to 14 multi-channel touches over 30 days. This is not 10 to 14 emails over 30 days. On average, what that means is you're sending about an email a week, give or take. I will run that for 30 days, and then I will usually let the account sit on ice for 30 days. And over those 30 days, I will typically run a combination of email, cold calls, and LinkedIn. In your early stages, when you're doing founder-led sales, you're probably not going to do cold calls. And so you're probably going to do a combination of email and LinkedIn. Your sales rep should probably be making cold calls, but they're going to try to convince you why it's not a good use of your time. I disagree. But usually if you can get probably 6 to 8 emails over around 30 days. And there's a cold email drip template that I can send out to everyone afterwards, that we put out on 30 MPC that you all can copy if that would be helpful.
Oh, I just heard the Zoom chat get really excited. Yeah, just went off.
There it is.
Cool.
I'll put this in the chat now.
Thanks. Okay, I know we have a lot of questions, but you also have a lot of great content that you're going to share. So do you want to keep it rolling?
Let's keep it rolling. All right. So this was process. I'll go through okay. You all tell me what would be most helpful because this is taking longer than I expected. So that's my bad. There are 3 things we could do. Number 1 is we could talk about the different calls in a sales cycle and the purposes of each of those calls. That would be number 1. Number 2 is we could walk through like the structure of a discovery call and how to get to problems, right? And that would cover a lot of the stuff that if we were to run one of those calls, what would that call look like? Or number 3, we can hard pivot to like hiring. Is there a preference in either direction? 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2. Okay, cool. So we're gonna stay away from hiring for now. While you all have me now, just screenshot this. This is the riff that I was gonna do on just making your first sales hire. This will give you a good example of what to screen for, what to interview for, and an example interview process as well.
Amazing. And we're going to share this recording out afterwards, you guys.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Awesome. So let's go back to, and we're going to cover this very quickly, which is the call to call. And then we'll talk about what happens in one of those calls, and that'll be an 8-minute dash. I'm going to go quick on this one, Kira, because discovery will take much more time. So every sales cycle is a little bit different, folks. The sales cycle that I usually find is most common is a commercial mid-market-esque sales cycle where you're dealing with 4-figure ACVs on the low end, usually 5 figures, some 6-figure deals, right? But generally deals in any sort of environment, they follow these phases. You typically go through discovery, and the goal of a discovery call is to find a problem. There should be agreement on a problem to be solved. Once you go through a discovery call, there's usually a demo call. And that demo call usually means that you take that problem that the champion had in the first call, and they see how you can solve that problem. And they're like, yeah, you can solve a problem. And then that brings us to the multi-threading phase, which is what we discussed up here, which is the champion's like, yeah, you can solve this problem. Let's get other people to agree that you can solve this problem. And you basically run 60-minute meetings with each group of power, sometimes 30-minute meetings, where you're just recapping. These are the 4 things that we learned that we could solve. What do you have to add, Mr. or Mrs. Chief People Officer? 15 minutes of discovery. Awesome. Here's a tight 15-minute demo on the things that we've already proven out, because we don't need to do a 60-minute demo because we already did that. And we know the use cases that are most important to you. Here are the 3 most important things that Kira shared with us earlier, and you, Jane, find that are important, right? Are you on board now? Great. This motion happens iteratively, depending on how many department leads you need to thread into your sales cycle. So 30-minute discovery call, 60-minute demo, maybe with another department lead, and then 30 to 60-minute iterative calls with as many other people that you need to get on board, okay? Rule of thumb is try to split different functions into different rooms. If you have 3 functions in a room, 5 people, you're gonna get a lot of awkward silences, and you're gonna get a lot of quiet deal killers. Try to have 1 meeting, 1 function, because your demo is gonna be tailored to that function, that use case, and you're also not gonna hear the hidden objections in a room of 10 people. Those meetings get really freaking awkward. Coach your champion out of the 8-person demo. You will get excited, your first 8-person demo. You will be crying after it's over, okay? Don't do it. Separate the rooms. It will take you more time. You will win the deal. And then lastly, number 4, you go into commercials. So once we have buy-in from your champion in power, typically at this point, pricing has soft been floated because they'll usually ask at this point in the deal cycle. But now we get into a formal proposal and a recommendation on what you actually need to do and what our commercial engagement will look like. And depending on the organization, that can happen with the champion, that can happen with the DM, but it should happen after the DM is at least on board with what you're doing. And then you thread it over to finance and you're running security review, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera afterwards. So a sales cycle can be 2 calls, it can be 1 call, but it usually goes through these phases. You almost always need to find a problem. You almost always need to do a demo. You almost always need to get someone who has signatory authority bought in. You usually need to go through pricing for someone to buy something. And every once in a while, this gets skipped in a more transactional deal cycle. There's no security, there's no vendor review. Whether you do this in 1 call, 4 calls, or 20 calls, depends on if you're an SMB or enterprise. Cool.
Okay, and I know there's so much to talk about in discovery, and we only have like 5 minutes left, but here's my question. And also maybe we can go to 11:15, but here's my question.
Let's do it.
What I'm sure people are asking about pricing from S0. So what do you do? How do you push them off or soft circle it in a way that doesn't feel like, sleazy?
Yeah, don't hide it. I really hate commission breast salespeople. There are a lot of like old guard enterprise sales tactics that frankly just piss customers off and like they give sales reps a bad rap. And here's my rule of thumb is if they ask on the first discovery call, what I will typically try to do is I will try to punt it to the demo. And what that means is, awesome. So Kira, you asked me for pricing. Maybe this is mid-call. It comes out of the blue, right? And I'm like, oh, totally. Well, typically what we would do is at the end of this call, is it okay if I recap the 2 or 3 things that I think we can be most helpful with? And then on our next call, I can promise to actually come back with a proposal that is tailored to what you've shared with me so that you know exactly what this costs. Because I would hate to give you something that's horribly downscoped that doesn't actually meet the problems that you're sharing with me. So is it okay if I ask you a little bit more around like your use cases so that I can give you like an informed proposal on our next call? And if the answer is no, I can give you a range. I would just like hate for it to be like something that is totally out of whack or sets the wrong expectations. Most people will stop because you've told them that you're going to solve it on the next call, at the end of the next call. Okay. For the people who still continue to push, I will give a range. And the range is wide. Really wide. It will be the range between floor and ceiling fully loaded plus some room. So it'll be like a range at Pave. It might have been a range between like, look, depending on I know you want to run comp cycles, right? So this isn't a total rewards only deal. It's going to be between $20,000 and $40K depending on XYZ, ABC, how many cycles, yada, yada, yada. By the end of the next call, I promise I will give you a more formal proposal based on what you share with me in these calls, because then I can tell you exactly what you need to buy. And I would hate to give you something that you don't need to buy. Is that okay? But does that at least like keep us in the ballpark of possibility? And so you've addressed the concern, but you haven't like given them a hard number that you've committed to yet.
Love it.
Cool.
Okay. Discovery?
Okay. Oh man, do we have time?
Yeah, I think we pushed to 11:15. I gave myself a 5-minute buffer in case this happened. I'm gonna vent. What are you gonna do?
Okay, amazing. Okay, so let's go to discovery. So if we're off in discovery, if your calls are these calls, so if these are your calls, this is the call to call motion, then what happens inside of the calls is this. There are 2 basic concepts that I really want to go over. Number 1, finding problems. Number 2, steering wheels inside of your discovery call. So your agenda and your 5-minute drill, AKA what a lot of people call setting next steps, those are your steering wheels for your car, okay? Your discovery is your ignition for your car. That is how fast your car moves or goes. If you do not set your steering wheel in the right direction, you will go really fast in the wrong direction. You use your agenda and your next steps to get to the right people in the sales cycle and make sure that the calls stay on track. You use discovery to motivate people to take those steps. And that's how these 2 things work together, okay? So let's start with the agenda and the next steps, and then we'll go into the discovery. A very basic agenda that you can set is purpose, plan, outcome. And I said it with you all today. Why am I here? What are we going to cover in the call? You can agree or disagree with that agenda. I gave you all the opportunity to disagree with our agenda today. And at the end of this meeting, What is the outcome that we're going to agree upon later on? Okay. And so if I were setting an agenda for a discovery call, it might sound like this. Kira, I really appreciate you taking the time. Let's say that you're the head of content marketing today, right? The goal of this call is to figure out if there's a way for 30 MPC to partner with Hustle Fund, et cetera, right? The way that we're going to do that is I'd love to understand how you're doing content today. And I'd love to also give you a sense of like the different ways that we can like nest in to a content organization. And then at the end of this conversation, usually two things happen. One, you tell me if this is like completely useless or sounds even like moderately interesting. So that would be the first thing that I just love to hear from you is like, don't be afraid to tell me no. That would be number one. But then number two, if it does sound good, usually there are other people that need to be involved, like your head of demand gen, Jane over there, or maybe it's Paul, the head of performance marketing or whatever, right? And then we can talk about if it makes sense to start to share some of these ideas with other folks, but really the first step is getting you on board. So any of that sound like an issue or any other things that you'd like to add? And so what I've done is, you notice subtly what we did is I've preceded this in my agenda. I've said, yeah, and if you say yes, right, which you have the option to say yes or no, then usually we'd talk about how to get in front of your head of demand gen. I've already started to put them on the golden path at the beginning of that agenda. Cool. And then all I'm doing in my 5-minute drill is I'm going right back to those questions that I told Kira that I was going to ask at the end of the call. So Kira, we've run this amazing discovery call. I guess my question for you is like, look, you have a sense of where 30 MPC can be helpful. I've recapped it. I've explained, I've story told, what have you. I know we have a lot more stuff to do together, but if it were up to you, would you continue investing time to look into our partnership? Yes, no? Does it seem like a good use of your time? Yes, no? Awesome, great. Hey, I want to be conscious of any milestones that you have. That was, do you want to buy? Second question, when do you want to buy? Okay. I want to be conscious. You mentioned XYZ content launch was happening. Maybe you mentioned that you're going to launch this product over here. Maybe you mentioned this thing over here. Usually what that means is you would want to have 30 MPC sponsorships done, locked and loaded by like Q2, it sounds like, but I don't want to assume. Is there like a time and place where you had something like this in mind to be rolled out? And now I'm getting a meter stick. I'm getting a go live date from you based on if you told me that you wanted to buy. So if you say yes, now I can ask you, yes, when? And the third question is yes, how? Which is, awesome. Well, I mentioned this at the beginning. If you want to buy this thing, that means we usually have to get the head of demand gen involved, right? So how do we get Jane involved in this, right? How do we make this real for them? Because naturally, this is one of those things where you're going to be the hero of the town, right? If content marketing gets to champion this, but this also does work for demand gen, one, you get to pull from two budgets, so it's not all coming from yours. But then two, now you can be the person that carries this across the marketing org. Usually Jane needs to be involved. Is there anyone else that needs to be involved or get their eyes on this? Awesome. Now I'm steering the call to the next call. So that's what happens in agenda 5-minute drill. Super quick pause for questions before we go into discovery. All right, I know this is going really fast. The last thing we'll talk about is what happens in that meaty middle of the call, and that's discovery, right? So discovery in 3 questions in 3 minutes. Here's how to find real business problems. Step number 1, find a problem. The easiest way to find a problem is to ask someone when they got on the call, after you set your agenda, why'd you take the call? People tend to not jump on calls unless there's something that's at least moderately interesting, okay? And so there are a couple signs that you've got the right problem. If someone says a real problem like, I don't understand total rewards, or my employees don't understand total rewards, my candidates don't understand total rewards, that's a good problem starting point. It's a little cut on my finger. That's it. If someone says something like, oh, I heard of Pave a lot, that's not a problem, that's a situation. Ask why again. Ask why again. And that would mean, oh, my guess is you saw something on the website. I guess, was there anything that caught your eye whatsoever? Or an investor recommended you to Pave. My guess is you don't take every call, or you probably looked at the website. Is there anything top of mind that like struck a chord with you? And you'll usually get to a problem. If they're really not giving you a problem at that point, you can use what's called typically language, which is typically when I'm talking to a chief people officer, a people ops person, they're thinking about things like A, B, and C. And those A, B, and C are the 3 biggest problems that you solve. Which of it is it for you? And now I'm prying and suggesting problems, but I would rather have them heat-seeking missile me to the problem. From there, what I can do is, let's say they say something like employees don't understand total rewards. What I now want to do is I want to turn that problem into a story. Okay. Employees not understanding total rewards doesn't mean anything for the business's bottom line. Who cares if employees don't understand equity if they're all staying, right? It doesn't matter. They're just confused, but like, who cares, right? It doesn't matter. And keep in mind, we're selling the page here. This is the product we're selling. So we got to get a bigger problem. And if I just ask you, Kira, when was the moment that, my guess is you didn't wake up and think, oh, shoot, today is the day where like none of my employees didn't understand equity. I guess, was there a moment when you realized that folks didn't understand total rewards? Or was there a moment or a candidate that like really struck your chord where you realized that, hey, this might be a bigger issue? And every single time they will answer with a story. When you hear a problem, just ask them, when was the moment you realized that that was a problem? And they'll be like, oh my God, this one candidate, they got a $150K offer and we were offering 125, but they didn't even have healthcare in the $150K offer and yada, yada, yada. And I'm going like, I know, this is crazy. And that brings me to the final step, which is, hey, I guess this might be a moderately awkward question, but you mentioned that one of your goals earlier on was keeping retention at a certain amount or reducing comp-based attrition by XYZ amount. I have to assume, is it totally out of bounds, but I have to assume that this is one of those things that seems top of mind for you to solve as it pertains to supporting that first goal that you mentioned. Is that right? Or am I totally out of bounds in saying that this might be one of those things that if you were able to solve it, it might move the needle on that other goal that your chief people officer was talking about? And I can use a humbling disclaimer, which is me just calling out the fact that the question is awkward, to point at this story being a more systemic trend across the business that they need to solve. And these trends that you're driving towards need to be board level problems: attrition, losing great talent, losing money, missing revenue goals, making revenue goals, etc. That is the level of visceral pain that you need to get to. And so anytime you hear something like, oh, I'm on spreadsheets, I don't like it, that's not a real business problem, folks. That's a situation, okay? That's a problem here. Try to bring them to a problem here. And if you can do that, you can drive your deals to power with your steering wheel. You can drive across and up the organization. You will win a heck of a lot more sales deals out there for yourselves. All right. Sorry, Kira. I totally went over on time. That was my bad, folks.
Don't be. That was so extraordinarily valuable and tactical. I like want to spend 2 more hours digging into all the information you had on that presentation. Everyone wants to know what's under the big black box. Is there a way we can get access to this amazing document afterwards?
I will, if it's okay, what I'll do is I'll put together like a bunch of screenshots of the flow and everything, and I'll send it out to y'all. And yeah, that's no problem for me.
Amazing. You're the best. You guys, Armand's the best. Please check out 30 MPC. The podcast is wonderful. I've dug into it recently and got so much value out of it. And I'm not even in sales, but I still learned a lot of valuable lessons. Armand, thank you so much for giving us your time today. You have been an extraordinary guest.
Amazing, folks. And I was going to send this out afterwards, but here, I'll put my email in the chat. If you ever need anything, please don't just put this on the internet, but it's armand@30mpc.com. I advise founders from time to time. If you ever just have questions, I'm happy to answer them in open forum as well. So thank you for having me on board. Connect with me on LinkedIn. There's only one person with my weird name, and you'll find me. All right.
Awesome. You're the best. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again so much.
Bye.
Bye. Oh my God, you guys, that was so good. I hope that was as valuable for you as it was for me. I'm not even in a founder-led sales position, but I learned so much. Okay, last bit here is we're getting into product. And I'm so excited about this because Kitaki Rao is a product legend, and she's going to walk us through what it takes to monetize a new product, which is a huge way that startups can unlock revenue potential. It's a little bit of a shift away from the things we've been talking about, but I think it's going to be incredibly valuable for those of you who are looking to level up your revenue. Here she is, Kitaki. Hello and welcome.
Hello, that was indeed incredible. I caught the last 15 minutes and I learned a lot. Very lucky to hear from Armand.
Yes, he's wonderful. And we're so happy to have you with us as well. Thank you for being patient. I know we ran over a little on the last set, but we're so excited to dive in today into product monetization with you.
Awesome. I am very excited to share more too. This is one of the reasons I got into product management, to build products that actually have value. So I'm really, really grateful for this opportunity to share some of my painful experiences and what I learned from them.
Fortunately, those painful experiences is often where we get the best lessons. And I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you. Before we get into the meat of it, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into product management, and what are some of the products that you've helped create and ship?
Absolutely. So I've always been into building things. Building things gives me joy. I mean, right from the time I was a little child. And so it was very natural. I went into engineering and I learned to build microprocessors, as it turns out. But what I ran into was the value portion of it. I would build products, but they didn't always deliver high value. So actually, the first two microprocessor projects I worked on at Sun Microsystems were both canceled after 4 years of development. You can imagine my first job out of school. I'm like, yes, I'm going to change the world and build new things. And these projects got canceled and I didn't even know why. I couldn't figure out like, what could we have done differently? So that's when I took a step back and said, I really need to understand how to better figure this out upfront so we don't take 4 years to invest in something and then throw it away. That's really what brought me into product management, because it is the true link between building things that matter, that create value. Along the journey, I've, of course, worked on microprocessors, like I just mentioned. I got the opportunity to work at Amazon on Kindle when it was brand new. It was a secret project we couldn't talk about with other teams at Amazon. So really 0 to 1 project at Amazon. Then I also worked on a few startups, including my own startups and startups led by visionaries. And I also worked at Salesforce on marketing technology products. So another great company where, customer obsession in a very different way. Startups, I've had the opportunity to work on my own, small startups that were pretty low in revenue. And then most recently data AI, where we were about 150 million in revenue. So span the gamut of products and revenue numbers, but I've had a blast doing it.
That's amazing. And it sounds like you've worked, so both startup experience and more enterprise experience, is that right?
That's right. And I found that bouncing between the two really helped me, Kara, because, big companies teach you how to scale and smaller companies, startup, teach you how to go deep, how to be more innovative and brave. So bringing those two perspectives by working in both sizes, I find has really honed me as a product leader.
That's such great and interesting advice. As somebody who very much sticks to startups, I've always been a little bit nervous about massive organizations, but I can certainly see the value of learning how to scale, especially when you have some budget to be able to work with and explore those avenues. Okay, well, I'm really excited.
Maybe
go
just
ahead.
like the key there is, find the right fit. So whenever I worked in larger organizations, they are newer products, right? And so it's, even though it's a large company, it's like a well-funded startup. Kindle was funded by Jeff Bezos because he believed in ebooks. At Salesforce, I worked on the customer data platform, which the company believed in. It was, again, a 0 to 1 product. So you can blend the two by finding the right type of opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds like their experience at Kindle is almost like a lab. Is that right?
It was already
like within an enterprise.
Yeah, it was already funded there. Like Jeff Bezos wanted to do it, so it was funded, and he believed in it, and I believed in it. I actually wrote a paper on ebooks while I was in business school, so it was just a meeting of minds. Very strange.
Wow, that's extraordinary. What a cool product to be able to work. I love my kid. Thank you for building it for me. And before we dive in the meat of product monetization, I'm curious, what do you think in terms of product management or product development, what elements of that are most important for startups to get right?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind, and it'll surprise maybe people that it's the people, the team. You want a team that has the can-do attitude. It's a team that figures out how can I versus, all the blockers that are in the way. That mindset, you've got to get the right people who will embrace that mindset. There are a lot of naysayers, and while they are very required at certain stages and certain parts of the company, not for the early product team. You want people who are like, how can I figure this out? To me, that's number one. Number two is prioritization, ruthless prioritization. So being clear about where you're going with your product strategy, what you're addressing, and what you won't do is very, very critical. And then the reason I'm so excited about your conference is getting to that first 3 million. Like, you may believe in it, you may have an idea, but till you hit that revenue target and you're seeing the traction, you don't know if it's real. It's brave, but is it real? So those three to me are very critical.
I love that. Well, I'm really excited to dive into this with you. The purpose of this event is all about helping startups unlock revenue by figuring out what levers they can pull, right, to more cash, basically. And so with that in mind, when we're thinking about developing or product-led growth, do you think for companies to develop new products that can be monetized, or to add features to existing products and then increase the price of those products?
Yeah, the way I think about this, Kara, is there is a market you're trying to address. I call it the total available market. And part of that is the serviceable addressable market. Where is it that your product can actually add value? If you're at the point that you haven't captured your serviceable addressable market, then building new features that can help you capture more market share is a better move in the shorter term. But if you've already captured your market, like you're the leader, you've got 90% of market share, then you may want to look for increasing the size of the overall market. So it depends. It is easier to add features to an existing product. You can always do things like tiering your product, creating add-ons. There's ways to add more ways to capture more value. But if you've not yet captured value, if you've already captured value, then you have to go into newer markets because you've captured all the value there is already. And it is definitely harder, right? You have to reach out to a whole new audience, acquire a whole new type of customers, get them to know about you and so on. So it's definitely the second thing I would consider. I would try to see if I've got my whole market first.
Makes sense. Okay, and I know you have some slides to share with us today, and I do want to get to those. Before we do, I want to just quickly sort of clarify something. When we're thinking about developing new products, should we be thinking about developing new products for a new audience, or are we trying to develop a new product for our existing audience? And I guess the way I think about that is that if we're developing for a new audience, then we have to go deal with the customer acquisition costs of getting to that new market. But if we're developing a new product for our existing audience, it sounds like maybe that doesn't work. Maybe that doesn't work as well because there's a cap on the market. Or so how do you think about that?
Yeah, again, it's really related to the previous question, where you're saying, do I build new incremental products or do I build a whole new product? Because if you're trying to go after a new audience, you may have to even just rebrand your whole product to be called something else to better appeal to them or build new experiences. So it's really like, do you feel you've squeezed the juice out of what you already have? Or you're not getting traction in what you already have, then you want to try and address a new audience because, like you said, customer acquisition costs are high. First have enough revenue that you're profitable and you're able to sustain the business, and then it's easier to go experiment. Or if you're not seeing traction in your current market, you want to do a pivot, then it's a good idea to try and look at a new audience.
Cool. Okay, I really like that framework. All right, well, I know I have lots of questions for you and our audience has some questions as well, but I know you have slides. So why don't we start there and then we'll dive back into Q&A. Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. And I do see the questions. Let's definitely come to them because I will go deeper into TAM and SOM and all of these concepts as well.
Yay, that's gonna be fun.
that. Can you see my screen, Kara?
Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. So reminder, we are in the getting to $3 million in ARR, and this is your last section. What I want to talk about is 3 key topics that I think every leader in your organization should be thinking about. It could be a chief product officer or a CEO, depending on where you are, because CEOs are typically heads of products at the start. I want to make sure you think about product strategy, you've looked at your market, and you've invested in product-led growth. And let's go deeper into each of these. I don't have too many slides, just one slide for each and one example for each. So product strategy, what I mean here is make sure the product you're building is serving your purpose. You may not have as well-defined company vision and mission as some of the bigger companies, but you should have an idea of it. When you talk to investors and you're talking to other people, why does your company exist? That's your vision and mission. Like, what's your reason for being? Now, when you bring it down to your product, you start looking at what's the vision for this product? How does this fit into the broader vision of the company? And tenets are principles. What will I do and not do as for my product? So that's the next step. Your company vision, break it down into what the product will do, the product's vision, and the product's tenets and principles. Next, you break it down into the themes. What are the different areas I have to invest in to make sure my product vision is a reality? And when you have themes, you can now start to figuring out your roadmap. I wouldn't go like roadmap 5 years at this point. I would just look at 1 year though. The reason for 1 year is now you get the rest of the team aligned. They're able to see where am I going in this 1 year, even if it changes, and it probably will in the next 2 quarters. It helps you and the rest of the team optimize. Can I do 2 things faster than 1 big thing? Right? So you're actually, with all of these, you're really aligning the team. That's the biggest goal here. Like, let's get everybody in alignment on what's the company trying to do, how the product fits into that, so we can all come up with ideas. When you're small at this stage, you want everybody to be moving in the same direction, not getting distracted by the hottest new thing, not someone coming saying, we should add ChatGPT today just because, right? Like, this is what will help you. And I'll give you an example from one of my favorite products. Very happy to meet Kara, a loyal customer, which is Amazon Kindle. So if you look at Amazon's vision, be the Earth's more customer-centric company, and specifically build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they want to buy online. Now, how did that translate into Kindle? It was about books, and it was about book devices. And Jeff Bezos very clearly articulated the tenet here. We want to make money when people use our devices, not when people buy our devices. So actually, Kindle devices are not profitable. When you buy a Kindle device, Amazon does not make money. Amazon makes money when you buy books, when you buy magazines that are content that's used. And that was the vision and tenet. So that was a guiding principle for all of us in the company. We were not about trying to get the most efficient pricing for the Kindle device. It was about getting the best books and the best content and the virality through the content. So in terms of the product strategy and themes, how did we build Kindle? We said one key theme or swim lane is devices. What type of devices work for Kindle? Should we build e-ink? Should we start exploring tablets and more interactive formats? That was one area of investigation. The second one was Kindle apps. People already have other devices. They have iPads and iPhones and Android devices. What if we make Kindle available already to them there? That's where the Kindle apps came about. And you can actually get as good an experience on a Kindle app, sometimes even better than as with the Kindle device. The third one was the ebook content, because at the time I joined, there wasn't any content. There wasn't even a clear format for ebooks. So there was an open source format. Do we use the open source format? There was a format Amazon created that was more powerful than the open source format. And Amazon actually also set up operations to create these ebooks because publishers didn't have ebooks. A fifth A fourth initiative was storefront and pricing. Oh, people come to Amazon to buy hardcover and paperback books. How do we surface Kindle here? What can we do more with Kindle that we couldn't do with previous devices? So look inside the book was an example. Libraries and lending was another example. And finally, self-publishing. What we found is publishers take a huge chunk of the revenue. So for authors, they would give up 80 to 90% of their revenue to publishers. Oh, it's a lot. So Amazon introduced self-publishing, where an author, specifically prolific authors or authors who were early and wanted more control, couldn't get a publisher to sign up. They could do self-publishing, own everything all the way from publishing the book to marketing the book. And I actually used this to publish my own father's short stories. So he's got 5 books published through self-publishing. And so you can see these 5 distinct themes, and now each of these teams could go and execute in parallel because they knew what that overall vision was. Try to get people to use the devices, to buy the books. That's the most key thing. Make it the best experience. So that was an example for product strategy. I can pause or keep going, Kara. Let me know what works best.
I think we keep going, and then let's grab the questions at the end and we'll just do them all.
Sounds great. All right, so let's go next into market analysis. And this is so critical, and I find so few startups doing this. Please, team, do this. Do this. Make sure you're addressing a problem that actually matters. Do not waste 8 years of your life like I did with microprocessors that went nowhere. So look at it as total available market. How big really is the market? How many people actually care about this problem? Serviceable, addressable market. So there's a market, a lot of people care about it, but how much can a product really address? Because you will find there are gaps in what the total market is and what a product is able to actually solve for. And then finally, serviceable, obtainable market. How much of the market can your company capture? Because your company will have some constraints, number of people, areas you can operate in, and so on. So that's going to give you an idea of number of customers you can expect. The other part of it is their willingness to pay. How much will they pay for this product? There's many different ways you can find this out, customer interviews, just talking, if you have existing customers, just talking to them. The 2 parts here is willingness to pay and the value they assign to different capabilities you're considering. So you've got your product strategy and your roadmap. What's most important to them? What will they pay more for? Because they will tell you every feature is nice, every feature is important, but which one will really move the needle in terms of value? Because if you can't get them to pay, you can't sustain yourself as a company, right? You're giving value away for free, which is great if you're a nonprofit, but you are a profit-seeking venture, so you have to be able to sustain the company to be able to continuously deliver value. And for this, I'll go to another company I worked at, Salesforce, where I worked on a 0 to 1 product again, which was the customer data platform. The goal of this is to bring together data from disparate sets of infrastructure in the company into one place to create a single source of truth about customers. So I can look up Kara, the customer, and know, did she buy anything from me? Did she have support tickets that she filed with me? Did I market to her and did she click on my ads? All of that could be brought together in one place. So the TAM is enterprises with customer data in different systems. So their data is not already together in one place, which is a constant problem in multiple companies. If you've ever been to, I will not name the company, but there was a very well-renowned company recently. I go in there, look at my tracking number. It's a different date of delivery in the app, a different date of delivery on the website, and a different date of delivery sent to me on my email. That's an example of it's in different places and it's not all in one place as a single source of truth. So that's the TAM. We looked at the TAM, Salesforce being global. It's a global company, so customers globally, what's the TAM? However, now what's the serviceable addressable market? What can our product actually address? Came down to, is the data in a place where we can access it? So is it in a system that's what we call the modern digital system, so available on the cloud or can be brought into the cloud? So if they'd got offline data sitting in papers, not ready for us yet. They have to first convert offline to online. If they have on-prem solutions, first they have to bring the on-prem to a place where it can be imported in. So it brought down the size of the market because there are still many, many organizations with data sitting in papers. So that was a serviceable, addressable market. Now, finally, the serviceable, the obtainable market, what could we at Salesforce accomplish was based on our product vision. So our product vision was bring together different parts of Salesforce first. So Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud, the Sales Cloud, and so on. And so it was customers who were using Salesforce. We started with that. You've already got your data in Salesforce, we can solve your problem right away. There were also regulatory constraints, regions in which Salesforce cannot operate because it's a US-based company. So that also brought down the serviceable, obtainable market to a smaller portion. I can't share actual numbers, but you can see that that was the process we went through, and I encourage you to do it for your startup so you understand what is the value and you can clearly articulate it internally, but even more importantly, externally to investors like Hustle Fund. Right? So they understand what's the total market, what's the overall, and where can you get right now? And they see your full potential and you see your full potential, so you're investing in the right area. So that's
and Kataki, I do want to pause really quick because Safex has a question I think is quite relevant. What are some of the systems that you use to calculate these numbers?
I didn't find any great systems. It really comes down to old-fashioned market research. But if you do find one, please let me know. I'd be happy to learn more. It is a little bit fuzzy, right? Like it's not going to be perfect. You can look at companies that provide data, market data. So, Gartner, Forrester, those type of companies, data AI for mobile apps where I worked last. That would be the closest source. But more than that, it's really just market research. It's okay if it's not perfect, but it's important you have a ballpark. Flying blind is more dangerous than being off in numbers because these will not be 100% accurate. But you do want to know if you're operating in the thousands, millions, or billions. It makes big difference.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly do. And speaking from personal experience, having worked at a company where we did almost no market research before launching a product because it sounded cool, right? And it was something the team was excited about. It was, it was pretty detrimental. So market research is critical. Okay, thank you for going into that. Sounds like there's an opportunity for someone to build something.
Definitely also do the cool projects, but make sure they're hobbies. Do it in your spare time, which I have done
Great.
a bit too.
Great advice. Great advice.
All right. Next up is product-led growth. So Kara, you referred to this, with customer acquisition costs. It's a huge opportunity for product to help by using product-led growth to acquire users faster. Don't have to send your sales team out. Don't have to invest in marketing campaigns if your product can generate growth on its own. And one company I admire really well for doing a lot of research, a lot of great content on this is Amplitude. And this is a visual from Amplitude's content about the product growth cycle. So 5 stages for product-led growth. First one's curiosity. Get people interested in your product. Like, is there word of mouth? Are people hearing about it? Bring people into the product and immediately have an aha moment. Like they come in and they're like, oh, I got it. This is why it's valuable. Give a value exchange. I learned something or I got something I couldn't do before. Your question on TAM. In data AI, you could come in and say, oh, what's my TAM? Could immediately get that answer for mobile apps, certain verticals. Then build a constant trigger, a cycle where they're constantly getting value. It's not one-time value they use and leave. They're continuously getting new value, often done through marketing campaigns. And then finally, once you've got a user into this loop of constant value exchange, help them be viral, help them spread the news to others who may care in their organization, as Slack did. In other organizations, as Zoom did really well. You call people to a Zoom meeting, now they're a Zoom user. And then that brings in the curiosity and that cycle again. Really quick example here from Data AI, the company I worked at last. Curiosity, we had published a state of mobile report. So this would give people information about the mobile market. Your questions of what's the TAM for mobile apps in, I would say, Spain in hyper casual games. You could get that from the State of Mobile report free, right? So it gets people curious about like what's going on. The reason why people came to know App Annie, which as it was previously known as, and now Data AI, is because of the State of Mobile report. Many more people read this report than actually use the product. Next step, the aha moment. When you enter the product and you sign up for an account, you got the top apps. Who is top in, let's say, the bubble shooter games in Brazil? You quickly get an idea. You can look at it by downloads, by revenues, different metrics. So you know, okay, if I'm developing an app, who's my competitor in this space? What are they doing? What is the revenue potential? An idea of the TAM, SAM, SOM, immediately you're getting that. You're also getting ideas for how to better build your product. So that value exchange happens. And then for triggers, we had a mobile app. We also had alerts and other techniques. So you can constantly get value. It's not a one-time value. And then finally, for virality, we introduced, I'm missing this. We introduced a dashboard that you could build and then share with others. So now you've got dashboards that are shareable. You bring in new users, right? They're seeing, oh, there's value. I should start using it. So in summary, want to make sure you define your product strategy because that's what you'll use to align your team. You want to do the market analysis so you know the value and you can articulate the value. And you want to see if you can invest in a little bit of product-led growth because users growing by themselves is a flywheel that will just help you in the company and everybody will benefit from it. Finally, I want to leave you with some references because this is not things that I came up with on my own. I learned a lot from looking around me and being at certain places. Salesforce has a concept called V2MOM. It's a framework to take the company vision down to the product vision and initiatives. They call them methods. I highly recommend this blog that's written by Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce. These 3 books are really, really fascinating. Working backwards, it's a story about, or more details on how Amazon builds products that are focused on the customer. It's starting from the customer, which is why it's called working backwards. You don't create a product strategy, you create a customer value strategy. And then work backwards to the product. Monetizing innovation, one of the rare books on how do you not just innovate, but you build products that will deliver value. So thinking of pricing and some of the TAM, SOM implications we talked about upfront. And then finally, jobs to be done, thinking about how to build value for customers through their jobs. I saw a little bit of Armand's presentation where he also talked about it as the 3 tiers. This is that 3rd tier he was talking about. So looking at the jobs, not looking at what they're complaining about. Last one, Amplitude's PLG guys, they have got so much content. Each of those 5 circles you saw, they will have ideas on how you can implement product-led growth through them. So with that, I'll stop sharing. I hope I wasn't too over my time because this is very exciting and I can lose track of time.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those. That was incredibly valuable and tactical. And would it be possible for us to share those with the audience after the event wraps up? Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have some questions from the attendees. So why don't we dive into a couple of those and then we've got about 12 minutes left. So we can, I think we can still tackle something. That was fabulous though. Okay, so Alex just had a question around, so here's what he says. I'm finding tension with focusing on growing paid subscribers versus growing overall users for B2C SaaS startup. We have a few paid subscribers, but we're focusing on subscriber growth has slowed our overall growth. Mm-hmm. Should we focus on attracting a larger user base by first giving away the product for free in order to learn, then figure out how to monetize? Or do we take a hit to growth, but really refine the product that attracts paid subscribers?
A great question and very critical for most companies. I had the same problem at Data AI. We had a free product and a paid product. The key, Alex, is are the free products you're acquiring aligned with the value you're going to deliver, right? So what is your product strategy, your company vision? If the free users you're acquiring align with your company vision, great. I'll give you an example. So Data AI, we had the free product, we had it open to everyone. Anyone with any account could sign up. The problem is it generated a lot of noise from people we weren't trying to attract. So, educators and people writing for news articles, like that wasn't our core customer. So we actually ended up limiting the free accounts to people with a verified domain, with a verified.com domain, because we didn't want all these Gmail accounts and these Yahoo accounts because we couldn't service them. Okay, it's great to have the users, but you need to provide value and you need to eventually monetize the value, especially right now, right? Especially right now, it's not just growth at all costs, right? The world has changed. It's about growing in a sustainable manner. So I personally am a big believer in have the right users, have the users who will eventually grow into your paid users. So give them the product for free if you need. Another way to approach it in your early time, Alex, is do you even need a free product? Is a free trial enough? Like, could you just take your existing product and say free for 30 days? And then whoever sticks is a real customer for you. And whoever doesn't was playing around and they got to play around, they tried it out. They're not going to be a long-term SaaS revenue for you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It also gives you an opportunity to learn what might make someone into a paid customer, right? So if you can have a customer discovery call with somebody who churned, you might get some really valuable learnings that you can then apply to future customers who might also churn, but try to capture them before that happens.
Yeah,
that's really smart. Okay, here's another really good question. So Dylan's asking, he says, we haven't been that disciplined and have started to capture a few different markets / different problems that are adjacent. Should I be thinking about focusing on one or multiple of those lines critically, even though there's traction on each one, or should I just focus on one?
Yes, classic problem in the early stage. You'll have lots of people saying, this is so nice. I would strongly encourage Dylan. First of all, you're not alone in it. This happens to everyone. Few customers will come and say, I'll pay you $1 million if you build this X or Y or Z. But will you get more than $1 million in the long term, right? So looking at that analysis, the TAM, SAM, SOM, and figuring out which one first. If you truly have a case where all SOMs are equal, like you are finding that there are multiple SOMs you could focus on, then it may be time for you to get investment, like grow the teams and build them out in parallel, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say give up on one of them, but take a look and see, is one bigger than the others? You may want to go there first, or easier than the others, less competitive than the others. Kara talks about greenfield in one of her blogs. Is it a greenfield opportunity? Get there first, conquer it, make the money, and then do others. Or if they're truly all interesting at this point, maybe it's time to get some investment help and grow the team.
So that's interesting. Why don't we talk a little bit about team organization? Because if you want to perhaps test, if you want to like almost incubate an idea for a new product or multiple products at the same time, what kind of roles do you think are critical? Well, not over hiring for that sort of discovery process, but still making sure that you're hitting all the points you mentioned in your presentation.
Yeah, so I'm looking at pre-3 million. As you grow bigger, you should start investing more in this. But pre-3 million, you want someone who's a combination of a designer, user, researcher person. So, someone who can look at it from the jobs angle. So get you that early market research on which jobs are critical to accomplish, but then also be able to use visuals to get feedback on the actual product ideas, and really conduct the design sprint for you. So if you haven't heard of it, I should maybe link to this too. Google has invented a process called the design sprint that lets you for 1 or 2 weeks just focus on a new idea, really build it out in terms of designs and get customer feedback, including willingness to pay. So you can articulate the idea. So, you're consciously taking 1 or 2 weeks out to do this, but you stop the noise, right? So either you say yes or no will go or no go. Another way I've seen work really well is to have an innovation day. So at Data AI, my data science team used to have an Innovation Friday. Every Friday, like we don't care what the burning problem of the year is or day is, We will take half a day to do Innovation Friday. And that's your time to explore, because the problem is you don't end up looking at the TAM, SAM, SOM, and all of the product strategy, because it's always less urgent. Right? So you want to take time for it. And especially at the startup stage, it's like, what's the customer feedback I've gotten? What's selling? What's not selling? What's the sales leader saying? What's the marketing leader saying about who's getting attracted? You want to take that in and synthesize it and figure out your next step. So not just like try new ideas, but also listen to feedback and see if it's generating new ideas. You just have to carve time out of it. You have to like block half a day at least once a week to do it, or do design sprints every quarter.
Do you need an engineer, or is that in-house to quickly like prototype / test if a product is sort of can be built, or is that something you would recommend outsourcing to an agency?
It depends. So, if it's like a web product, so you're building a consumer product and it's an app or a website that's self-contained, you can build it. Like, you don't need an engineer to tell you can build it. If it's a big data product and has some AI capabilities you'll want to do for the first time, like if the product value is the new technology, then you may want to get that. Often I find, like, if you do the design sprint, you can do the design sprint with one designer, researcher person, and one engineer. You don't want the whole team jumping on it. You want to keep that group that's working on the design sprint small, because the rest keep working on the bigger product. So it really depends. Like, are you trying to invent new technology? Then you probably want an engineer. If not, like, try to do it with visuals. Engineers are the most expensive and bottleneck for the company. So I try to touch them as little as possible.
I can understand as well. That's usually when I work for early stage startups, that's the last critical role we bring on, and just try to duct tape it together as much as we can without them. Yeah.
Once you figure out value, you know who to bring in too, and how much.
Yes, absolutely. That's really cool. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so then let's talk about sort of even if you do all research in advance and you feel like you have a pretty good sense of like, oh, I think this product is really well. Have you ever had an experience where you realized after launching it wasn't working? What were the signs of that? And then do you pull it or do you iterate?
If someone says they have not had that experience, they haven't worked long enough. So if you've been bold and you're taking risks, it will happen. I will say it has happened more times than it has not happened. You don't get success with every product, especially with innovation products. At Data AI, I also had a labs team. So that's, really just going in and doing innovative products. 1 out of 10 was a very successful labs team. Because you have to try and iterate. You're going in uncharted territory. The one example that comes to mind is at Data AI, we created a mobile performance score. So it was about saying, what's the score of a particular app? Instead of looking at download estimates, revenue estimate, engagement, like user activity, can we just score it and say you are 90 out of 100? So we did that through labs, and the first iteration, immediately we got feedback that the idea is good, it's very valuable, but the way we did it was not right. So we had created one score across the whole mobile ecosystem. And that just didn't work, because how do you compare a banking app to a gaming app, for example? Right. So we did take a step back. We left it in beta. We said, okay, you can play with it. Luckily, we had labs, so we could leave it there. And we went back and read it. We rated the whole technology. But we got really valuable feedback that the idea was good. The score would really help me. And the way we had designed the score along 4 performance dimensions was very helpful. But the way we implemented it was not right. So we went back and re-implemented it, whole new data science and technologies to power verticalized country-based scores. So that was key.
Verticalized and country-based.
Yeah, because, Facebook is a great social network for the US, but is it a great social network for China? No. So how can you compare, our social network with a social network of another country?
Yeah, it makes tons of sense. And of course, hindsight's 2020, right? You look back and you're like, oh, of course that would have been important. Why didn't we think of that in the beginning? So I guess with mind, is there anything you think startups can be doing while they're in this innovation phase to reduce the risk of that moment where they're like, ah, shoot, we should have thought of this? Is there any?
Yeah, test. Like there's not one time to test. So before you start market research, while you're building, show the designs. While you're building, if you can create an MVP beta product, have customers look at it. That's the only way to get it. And you will make mistakes. It's okay. Not everybody will. I mean, we did MPS full research. We did all of this. Customers saw everything, but till they saw the product, they didn't realize they didn't want it this way. So it's okay. Just test as often as you can. Don't wait for product perfection. Get it out in front of your sales team, your marketing team, your customers as often as you can. At the later stages of data AI, we would do weekly shows and tells. So just weekly, here's where the product is at. What do you think? Like the whole company would come in and weigh in on that. And then we would run beta programs for every new initiative. So customers came in, were invited to betas and would participate. CDP at Salesforce Sync, we had 25 customers who did a year-long beta with us.
Oh, 25. 25 feels quite small. Do you think that's the right number for beta testing products?
For a B2B product, enterprise B2B, it was good enough. I think if you're doing a consumer product, you want more.
Like how many?
For a consumer product, it depends again on what's the size you're trying to reach, but 25 is sample size statistically. So you want to get bigger than that. The beta users you can get signed up will also give you an indication of popularity. So if your aim is to get 1 million users, you should try to get at least 1% of them, 100 signed up as beta users. It depends what your goal is.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Oh, Taki, I know we have a lot of things we didn't get to cover today, but this has been so valuable, and I'm so grateful to you for giving us your time this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for inviting me, and good luck to all the founders. I really do admire what you're doing, and I'm so excited for all of you. Really looking forward to hearing more from you and the Hustle Fund on new successes.
Thank you so much. Is there any way the community can get in touch with you or follow along on some of the things you're doing? Are you on LinkedIn or anything like that?
LinkedIn would be great. That would be awesome.
Perfect.
I'll share my LinkedIn, and I'll also share the presentation. Always happy to take questions. If it's a lot, I may take a week to respond, but I will get back to every single thing on LinkedIn, I promise.
Wow, you're so kind. And yes, you guys, we will share everything out afterwards. Taki, thank you again so much for being here. You're just wonderful, and so grateful again to you for giving us your time today.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, take care. Okay, y'all, I know we are a little over, so many of you have probably jumped off to work or grab lunch or whatever you needed to do. Thank you for joining us today. If keep an eye on your inbox, we will send out the recording, we will send out the slides, we will send out all the Twitters and LinkedIns and whatnot. If this was interesting for you, something that you found valuable, definitely check out Hustlers Retreat. It's an in-person event hosted by Hustle Fund at the end of next month in Northern California. It's going to be strategic and tactical and fun, and we would love to have you there. And we'll certainly send information about that as well. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.